Hear that sound? That's the future knocking on your door. Gear up for an unprecedented experience with HomeBrew AI. An electrifying community of brainiacs, AI enthusiasts, digital alchemists, and knowledge seekers. This is where fellowship intermingles with creativity. Build bridges with fellow trailblazers, plunge into intellectual odysseys, and let your synapses jive to the cadence of progress. We're embarking on an ambitious endeavor to chronicle the singularity. So head over to HomeBrew AI, where the news is hot, the ideas are brewing in the singularity. Well, that's for you to find out.
Yeah.
We're the only people that were prepared for this, Michael.
Well, now not fully my fault. My NVIDIA broadcast has crashed. So I'm just
long-time fan, first-time speaker. Excited.
Yeah, I always appreciate you watching. We're slowly building here. We'll get there.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Johnny's technical difficulties, yep. Justin's technical. What's going on?
Shoot.
Listen, at some point, me and you are just going to start the podcast. It'll just be me and you, Michael.
Sure. I'm up for it. That's fine. No problem.
Mr.
I'm ready to go.
There he is.
I figured out what the issue was, so...
Oh, that's why. You switch shirts. Ah, sweet. That is a nice shirt.
I'm going to move my laundry basket. I'm moving. I know, I've got these nice shorts on.
Okay. Have you ever heard
at least you got shorts on.
Have you ever heard the thing where the guy with the Hawaiian shirt is either the richest guy in the room or the poorest guy? There's no in between?
Yeah.
Oh.
Pretty accurate, yeah. So what happened was so I use a Razer, a UI basically, that goes down and shuts all my background programs when I'm playing games because I only have a 2080 Super and I don't want to buy a new graphics card. So it basically slows everything down to a crawl aside from the game that I'm playing, and so I actually get a lot more out of my GPU. I get a lot more out of my RAM and my CPU. The problem is, and I didn't know this, is that because I've been using it post last podcast, is that it has basically knocked my NVIDIA broadcast out of accessing my microphone and my webcam. So every single time because my Discord's going through NVIDIA webcam, my entire Discord would just freeze. And I was like, oh, my internet? Oh, please don't tell me my internet's not working, but it wasn't. So I'm just going to have to use through Discord. So I got it figured out. I'm not
okay.
Well,
I'm very sunburned.
If I were to recommend anything for like computer optimization, it would be Atlas OS. It's a bit of a overhaul to like install it, but it's pre-packed Windows. That's pretty good optimization wise. So you don't have to use the Cortex. I know all the tricks. I'm that guy. Hello, Justin.
Hey, there we go. Is it still bad, guys? Sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. I just recommend push to talk with the background noise. Like, you're fine once you're talking. But we should be
I'll just mute myself until I'm talking. That'll be fine.
You can't handle hitting buttons? So
yeah, no, okay, all right. Yeah, I can.
just
I'll go to push to talk. Just give me a sec.
You save some trouble for yourself, you know?
Plus, the other thing I've been working on is I'm booking my flight over to England. So
how's that going, by the way? Just to bring
there was some miscommunication on my end. So I thought that Jasmine had already booked it, and Jasmine thought that she was waiting on information from me because she's very organized and I'm not very organized. So I'm like, oh yeah, so the flight's all booked. She's like, what? No, I'm still waiting. Whatever. And I was like, no, I'm pretty sure I told you could go ahead and do it. She's like, no, you didn't. And I was like, oh, I probably didn't.
Yeah. So are you going over there for the long haul? But by the way, this is a thing I'm going to have to deal with him as far as co-host. He's going to be stuck in England, you know.
So it just depends on how deep I want to pursue my education over there in law. It's going to be at least 1 year minimum plus 1 year of an internship paid internship. Luckily, I don't have the. I don't do unpaid work. I'm too old for that. There's no such thing as exposure or experience. I like money, you know. So I'd say 2 to 3 years probably. In the on the smaller scale, if I really like it over there, I think Jasmine would like to live in the States instead of in England. So, I'd say the longest possibly would be 4 or 5. So just a nice amount of time. Nothing crazy.
Okay,
Cool.
that's cool. So I guess we can kind of we'll just work around him as far as his technical difficulties. I don't know what's going on exactly, but
Yeah.
so you
Sure.
so Johnny, these Michael and what was he, Mr. Jungle? What were we calling him? Jungle Justin.
Justin. You can go by Justin. Yeah.
but he they're both like deep into the AI art community, and they also host their own AI art community and stuff. So
that's very
they
awesome.
talk about other things AI adjacent, but I thought it would be interesting to hear what their general opinions are on like the future of art and stuff like that goes, and just what's going on in the generative art space. They keep up with it pretty well.
Yeah. If we can't, we have friends that keep us in the loop too, much like what you guys do. Too probably.
We
keep up,
attempt.
right? You can utilize. Yeah, you tend to. It changes so fast though too, right? And so Tree Mansion. Tree Mansion's the home for AI artists, and we have a platform to allow artists to come on board and sell their art. Build a shop in 15 minutes and sell their art and ship it to anywhere in the world. And so when we have a bunch of artists on board, we have a network that we can work with to see where is AI at, especially in the art space, and kind of go from there. As you guys well know, it changes every day. Do we know where LK 99 is these days, Joby?
It's
a sad story.
abandoned.
Okay, we're just leaving it alone for now. And look,
I think it's going to be a long.
It's so
joke,
over.
though.
that anymore?
It's so
Listen.
over. We're never coming back.
listen, a lab out there is going to fart and tell a joke, and something will happen. Maybe one day, just not for now.
Well, I think at the very least, the positive benefit that came out of that it has re-sparked interest in science to some degree, which is good, and it has re-sparked interest in this concept. There's new ideas on how to get to a superconductor and what could be room temperature.
If it ain't the breakthrough,
So,
it's the pathway to it. There's some sort of funding that will go into research on it. It rekindles the flame.
Well,
That's
yeah,
awesome
all
because
these,
it keeps the research going. Keeps the
all these
momentum and
scientists
excitement
are-
behind it.
Next thing you know, these labs are approaching, billionaires saying, "Hey, fund this." And even if it doesn't work on an LK99, these labs probably got funding just to research it, so they're going to continue doing that, and that is the positive result. So it is good, but LK99 wasn't the hero we thought it was, or at least we were along for that hype cycle, and that was some sort of hype cycle. Oh my god!
Well,
I had a
so
good
we
time.
Hey, we needed something
can't
to pay
just-
attention to. We're waiting for the next AI models. It is what it is.
Well, so you
Yeah.
guys, if you both work in the AI art community, then maybe it seems to me there's a lot of, and then tell me if this is what you think it is. There's a lot of almost sort of sour grape syndrome from a lot of artists who feel
absolutely.
like, oh,
Love
well,
we have
we love
haters. We have
Bring it.
we have death threats. But we've seen this before. Thus, we're not scared, or we kind of thrive in the energy of it because it's coming, it's here, and we're just adapting to it.
Yep.
We're embracing it.
One of our I guess professors, because Mike and I went to school together way back when for animation, and our professor was a former Pixar animator for the original Toy Story. He was the guy who animated Buzz Lightyear, and so just to kind of put like an allegory to it, when he was in working with Disney, 3D or Pixar rolled in this 3D, rolled in basically a CRT TV with a VCR on it, and they pressed play on the tape and then started, showing them a demo of 3D animation. And half of the people in the studio or at Cal Arts were kind of like, get it away from here. That's not real animation. We don't want to see it. This is cheating. You guys shouldn't be using this stuff. It's, evil, basically. And the other half went with Pixar, and they're like, no, this is exciting. This is cool. Let's check it out. Let's see what's going on with it. Steve was a late bloomer onto the technology. Like, he was one of the people that was kind of like, I don't know about this. But then he was like, oh, wait a minute, I kind of see where this technology is going. So he finally got himself on board, and then it was to the point where he was actually animating Mr. Potato Head and Buzz Lightyear in the first Toy Story, and he adopted it. And he's like, well, could you imagine if I hadn't jumped on board, I wouldn't have these accolades. I wouldn't be in the industry. I wouldn't know the people I know.
Parts of my childhood wouldn't exist.
Yes, exactly, right. Like
and none of the people today would really be like, that's evil, that's terrible, that's taking the job out of animators. No one's going to argue that, right?
Exactly. No one's going to.
Well, unless they would have about AI. Unless you're talking about AI. Yeah.
So, but it's accessibility. Like someone like me, I love art. I love, so my girlfriend is an artist in the fashion community. So,
Awesome.
for inspiration, she'll use some AI stuff. She'll try to for like patterns and stuff like that, and for like knitwear, she uses a lot of that stuff just for inspiration. So that's accessibility for me as someone who loves art, loves an artist, and is interested in it, but I have no manifesting it to a physical realm for me is a step that I just don't have. It's not my area of expertise. And you want me to draw a face? It looks like a child did it. But I'm like, I really wish that I could make art. I have ideas, I have concepts, but it's accessibility for someone like me. I'm like, look, finally now I can take the concepts and ideas that I have, and I have this medium where now I can express it without spending the next 10 years of my life getting to even, like, let's say a moderate, because I don't have the time to invest in something like that.
Nobody's got
it's
time
a
for that.
passion. Yeah. Unless you're going into the field and you've wanted to since you were a kid. That's usually how artists start.
Exactly. And designers go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and Justin and I started as 2D and 3D animators. Like, we started as animation, and we started with like doing pixie dust,
hardcore
on paper, and flipping through pages,
classical animation,
and ripping
your
hair
head against a brick wall, until it bleeds, unicorning with pencils, you name it. It is blood, sweat, and tears. And now we have tools that make this easier. And you're going to complain about it as a designer. Maybe you need to wrap your head around it a little bit better and figure out what's going on. Because, I put a perfect example. Somebody was complaining about AI art on Twitter, and I was just messing around with, Midjourney, as you do, and you have some fun with it, and you create all kinds of crazy things. And we had so I did an output of a guy wearing Balenciaga, like a really fancy Balenciaga suit, riding a T-Rex into, like, in a desert. And I just replied to this guy on Twitter, and I said, be right back. I got to go pay for this photo shoot. Like, that's probably like, there's a guy wearing Balenciaga riding a dinosaur. You can't create that now with it. Like, no one would want to do that. So now you have an opportunity to create things that you didn't have before. That image would not exist if Midjourney didn't exist. My image of a dragon with opulent skin, and whatever kind of terminology you want to put around it, and however you want to manifest the image, that would not exist if not for these tools. So you can get angry about it, but we're creating things in an instant with that had never existed before, and if it wasn't for the tool, nobody would see it. So go ahead and there's the detractors and there's the haters. These people, they're probably just they have a lot of prejudice because they've read one article and made their mind up about what AI art is about, or
there's a video of Bryan Cranston screeching his head off about how, like, they're not taking our jobs and all this stuff, and I don't know, there's like a level of, like, number one, like, dude, you're like a millionaire, so it's like very hard for the average person to really sympathize with what you're talking about. And then the other aspects to it are, generally speaking, like, there's something to be said for what we're headed towards with just the ability to create something you want, right? Let's at the most, that's what we're doing. So your imagination to creation window is shorter. So you can generally make what you want. So something that you guys both probably know very well is that a lot of comedy has come out of animation because it's a realm where you're less censored as far as what you can do because it's animated characters. This is another like aspect.
They're not real.
It's another aspect to AI art that we're kind of headed towards, where this is another vector for, like, honestly, like free speech and Overton window shifting and challenging ideas in general. So like inherently, like, degrees of like censorship to this are just also to censor that, where the ability to create is the ability to spread ideas. So even through any artist that's like very like deep thinking about it, this is also another aspect of their thought process.
Absolutely. And it also comes down to, what have we not explored yet? It's like we don't know what we haven't explored yet unless we push that envelope. We keep coming back to traditional art because that's what we know. But what if we fundamentally change how art is created? Maybe instead of worrying about the pencil and whether or not where the idea came from, is what happens when we start to change the fundamentals now that we kind of grown from it. And much like Johnny's stick figure, or lack thereof, now we can get Johnny's ideas on the page. And what does that ripple effect happen? Yeah, and when does that kind of ripple effect happen throughout the world? Like, now we're thinking globally, almost one-to-one, your thought to what image or what video.
It's very much based in fear-mongering, it seems to me, because no one's going to sit here and say, okay, well, let's take traditional cinema versus animated cinema, right? No one's going to be like, well, think about the set designers and the prop masters and the costume designers and all the background actors who are not going to get paid if it's an animation, right? You don't have to pay extras when you have an animator making that stuff, right? So in theory, people are losing out on a job when they don't do a live action film. Well, CGI, how many people are losing out on a job like this? Then no one makes those arguments because they're very silly.
Yeah.
But then it's AI, there's fear mongering, everyone thinks, oh, we're all gonna lose.
And in here comes the movie The Congress. I don't know.
Have you guys seen The Congress yet?
Yeah, the Congress, for anyone who hasn't seen it, is effectively a movie about stars and starlets sell their digital image. They get full scans and they can generate movies with their person. From anything you can think of, they just generate the movie and animate the whole thing without them actually being in the picture. So this effectively gets to the point where, you know, it gets to more like sci-fi stuff where you can eventually just experience being that person. But there's a lot of aspects to the movie that just are oddly prolific to what we're actually experiencing now, where, you know, you do have, so the people like judging the AI people, it is pretty, it's pretty harsh because the studios themselves are trying to like pass contracts to extras where you're now an extra that I can scan and put you somewhere else. So yeah. Why are you shitting on me for using an image generator?
Mike, do they're doing that? Yeah, totally, exactly. Why are the studios being yelled at? But Mike has a story behind that, actually.
Yeah, one of the reasons why the Congress is so important today is because it's happening today. Actually, Johnny, I was a background artist. Actually, been on about 40 projects as a background actor, and I've it was just traditional filming and shoot. You get paid for what you do on set, but on a Disney set, I'd say this is back in 2017 or so. They changed it up from traditional filming to get in line, walk into a warehouse, and inside the warehouse is a huge sphere of about 2,000 cameras, in which case you step into the center and get scanned. And since I had seen the Congress beforehand, probably in about 2014 or so, I'm like, nope, I know exactly what you guys are doing. If you step into that, the fear aspect is that you don't get paid anymore after that, because now they kind of own your image. Where Robin Wright did an interview in 2017 and asked, "Hey, in terms of the movie The Congress, I'm sure you get a question quite often about, would you do that? Would you actually have yourself scanned in every emotion possible, in every inch of your body in this spherical contraption, and then sell that imagery for X amount of dollars?" Her answer, which would most likely say, you think she'd say no, or even maybe yes, that she would if she was offered such a deal, right? But what did she say? She said that she had already done it years ago. She had already scanned every inch of her body and every facial features. And back to fear, it's not that you have to fear it as much as understand it. That's what's required here. Understanding. That's kind of why we're so afraid of where we're headed in any given deal, is because we don't understand it. And the more you understand it, the more you can choose whether or not you want to get scanned or not, or what ownership you have over your own imagery, art, or what have you.
The legality.
Yeah.
I just want
and that's why so many people are fearful. Sorry.
Like, and maybe so there's two actors that I know that have already been scanned in and sold their likeness to the studios, and the first one would be Robin Wright, and the second one that I know of is actually what's his name, Bruce Willis. But Bruce Willis has a form of dementia called aphasia, and it makes him not be able to have an imagination. So he can't act because he can't pretend to be somebody else, because he can't imagine things. So he has sold over his digital rights, his likeness, his image over to Paramount Studios. So now whenever they make a movie with Bruce Willis in it, it is 100% 3D and digital, and actors can now choose to do that. So it might not be based out of fear. It might be based out of, well, I'm aging out, or I'm in that was Robin Wright's case. She was aging out and didn't have the clout to maybe get the roles that she wanted to, but with this new technology she could. So, and then on Bruce Willis's case, like, he can't act anymore, but people want to see his movies because they like what he represents and how he does it. So the studios are going to be pretty persuasive in the way that they can pitch this to people. But on top of that, speaking of Paramount, I read an article like 2 weeks ago where they were caught putting in extras in the background that were digitally captured and put into the movie without the permission of the person that they digitally captured. It wasn't written into the contract. So,
that's where the issue. That's
100%.
but that.
Yep.
But that's the ethics of business, right?
Yep.
There's been plenty of time where extras and stunt doubles and people within the industry were already getting screwed, right? So this is not a newfound thing. It's just one of the issues when the technology and the medium changes. There are going to be people who try to find loopholes and ways to not pay people. And so but at the same time, I understand the backlash against the technology, because if you don't understand it and you don't understand how the, I guess, legal precedent has been set up, and you don't understand your own rights, your own regulations, and what you're agreeing to, you're going to say, well, no, I don't want it. No, I'm not. And you hear all the horror stories about something, right? And then you think
Absolutely.
every worst case scenario. So I understand that.
Right.
Exactly.
Something else to speak about on that is basically there's all sorts of stuff in show business where, like, somebody's getting screwed, right? One of them in particular is voice acting. You get absolutely murdered if you're a voice actor. It is You're basically making the same amount as like a lower end car salesman, where you're having a little bit of good times when you actually have work, and then a little bit of just bad times. You're doing an extra job in and out of your voice acting, right? So depending on how high of a tier voice actor you are, you're not making very much, right? The other part of it is that they have even worse like contracts than anyone who does just a normal television show for voice acting, is that you don't get royalties for most voice acting. This is a big problem in like anime dubs and stuff like that, but it's throughout like the voice acting profession. You do not get royalties. So you're forever the voice of a video game, and they never pay your ass. They pay you that one time. That's it. And your voice is just forever in this game, and you get no royalties every time someone buys it. So like it's not the rage against the AI artist or the AI prompter, so to speak, is always misplaced, because they've already been getting like screwed out of money for a long time. It's kind of the aspect of like the argument against like pirating music or video games or movies in the past. The argument against it was always like, you know, that they're stealing it, but in reality, they were never going to buy it anyways. That's like 90% of all pirates. They weren't going to buy it. So it doesn't really matter that they stole it from you. Yes, it sucks that they can still enjoy it for free for the person who wants to, you know, get the money, the royalty checks for your work. But at the end of the day, they weren't going to buy it. So it doesn't necessarily affect you.
Gabe Newell's strategy against pirating is, okay, there's always going to be a group of people that are going to pirate. However, part of that group, if we can offer a better service, right, they're just not going to want to pirate it anyways. They're going to say, well, I could pirate it, but not pirating it, I've got all the servers, I've got all the stuff that they provide. They have these sales, they have these trading cards, they have the whole thing. I have it all right in my library. They just offer such a good service that I'm actually, at least I feel like I'm getting more out of just buying the products than I would going through the trouble of pirating it and dealing with all that. And so that's because back Steam, that was one of the big things. Like, oh, people are just pirating PC games. Everyone's pirating them. They're all just doing shareware. They're just, you know, there's nothing. What are we gonna do? And that's, he's like, just offer a better service. They won't pirate it, and it worked. You know,
Yep.
So many people use Steam as opposed to pirating.
Yep, it's true.
A big problem Hollywood has coming with, like, you know, the big aspects of like malicious like streaming at this point is what I'll call it, because at first it was pretty convenient to, you know, go on Netflix or something like that and you could watch a lot of movies that you wanted, and it was giving revenue to movies that otherwise wouldn't have got any revenue because it was just a cheap service. It was way better than pirating, right? The problem now is, like, you know, you just need one nerd in your house to know how to set up a seed box and a Plex server, and now everyone's got whatever shows you want. So it's extremely cheap for one to set up and be able to watch any television show you want now. It's very easy for that one person in your family to route it to all of your Amazon Fire Sticks. Like, you're pretty screwed is the point. If you try to offer a bad deal for your streaming service, which is what they're dealing with now. Everything is so easy to just torrent. Like, torrenting has gotten significantly easier. All of it is just like they repeatedly shoot themselves in the foot by trying to get too much. They pay everyone else too little, and then they try to get too much, and then at the end of the day, they're blaming some other guy who has nothing to do with it. You're just a guy on a computer making art. You're having a good time, but you're an asshole. But, like, it doesn't make sense. It's people doing bad things are always looking for a scapegoat, and I think that's where you guys are at in this with your death threats and stuff.
Yeah. So I think.
Well, I think. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just like there's that old saying where no press is bad press, or bad press is good press, or something like that. Like, if you're getting attention, then another saying that actually our major investors likes to mention or go through or repeat is human attention's the most valuable thing in the world. And so, if you're even if you're getting that bad vibe or those people giving you those death threats, you should be. And Mike and I have a plan for this too, is to make that public and show everyone, because that actually feeds fuel for people. Like, people love seeing controversy. They love seeing, people getting outraged and making death threats, and it's an attractor. It's kind of like a form of the Barbara Streisand effect. So, when we're looking at this from a like a 30,000 foot view, we're seeing that people are going to be like, this is an immediate gut reaction. People don't know how to feel about something, so they look for an initial somebody who's like already said something about it in an evil way, and then they just copy that. They haven't sussed out, they haven't thought of any thoughts themselves, and so we're just going to feed on that. We're going to we literally have a bucket or an incoming email bucket and log of all of the hate that we get, and we're just putting it and we're collecting it, and we plan on putting that back out to the world and show just how crazy this gut reaction is.
An example of that actually working is for FPS players, like certain really high level FPS players. One was a good example is like this guy named Symphony, who was incredibly good at like Call of Duty. Don't know if he was actually cheating, but all the cheating accusations and stuff like that brought attention to him. So it's a good strategy. That's a real, or another real example of that working for people. So it's a good idea.
Yeah. So that's all the hate and everything aside, people really love the work. Like, we just in the last 2 weeks, we've done a pop-up market here in Calgary, and we just have a tent with some of the work and some of the art that people have put up on Tree Mansion, and a lot of it's locally. And people walk by and they're looking at it and their eyes are popping out of their heads because they've never seen anything like it before. And oftentimes, like I was saying before, this art wouldn't have existed without AI, and people absolutely just go gaga for it. We're doing great sales on the pop-up market. So it's like, we're already proved that it is a viable medium, because we tested it first of all out in a fine art gallery. Initially, there was a few kind of like hems and haws about it, but we broke through, and we were doing displays in fine art galleries like a Peak Gallery here in Calgary, and people were buying it off the walls. Like, there's definitely a market for it. So what I see happening in like the year to 2 year span of the near future is that eventually people will just not even look at it twice. They won't even, all the hate that's gone through, it'll just disappear as the technologies become more normalized and just part of the everyday tools usage. Like, everyone's going to be using in Adobe and Firefly and everything. So how are they going to complain? And then there's another point.
They won't even know the difference either.
They won't even know the difference.
When you ask, hey, did someone do Photoshop? Well, did you use AI? It's just the same thing.
Right.
It can be a standard.
It's interesting this is coming from the art community. And I'm not knocking the art community, but so if you ever, there's a guy who did an MTV interview. I'm trying to think. I always forget his name. I'm trying to think of who it is. But anyways, basically he had issue with the glam rock in music videos. And he was saying, like, it's cool, it's whatever, but these are like corporatized whatever, right? It's show. The music is a separate entity than them dressing up with the makeup and the big hair like a twisted sister. He's like, I'm not saying the music's bad. He's like, but to me personally, all the other stuff is BS. And it's interesting to me that the art community is upset when you have stuff like a Banksy, where the art itself isn't really anything crazy, right? It's not this very handcrafted. It's a think piece. It's got all this extra stuff around it, right? And people eat it up. They love it. And then Jasmine took me to, I think it was the London Fine Art Museum, and then they had the toilet. And I was like, oh, there's a toilet. And she's like, it's not actually, if you guys are familiar with the toilet, there's a toilet installation and it's an art piece. It's not the original toilet. Someone stole the original toilet. It's not even the one that the guy wanted to put up. I'm like, well, what the fuck? It's not even the real toilet. Some guy stole it, right? And so they put a fake one up. It's just a replica. It's a replica of a fucking toilet. And I'm like, but it's still up in the Fine Art Museum. So how can the same people that do this, which to me is just bonkers. I mean, I was already pissed off that you had a toilet up there, but I get it. It's a whatever. Ooh.
Right.
But it's not even the real one. And then you're going to come at people that are making AI art, and you're going to be like, oh, well, that's not okay, though.
Yeah.
So,
and
if I could,
that's like a right on point, like bullseye, because like, you know, you get into this corporate, you get into the corporate land where all the artists are like, oh yeah, we should, you know, follow Adobe's, you know, lead with this because they're making everything legal and they're using only approved images that they've used off of their own Adobe stock site. And so like all of everything's all certified and everything like that with a C2PA. I don't know if you guys know about what's going on with that, but what Adobe wants to implement is a authentication software where it's all of your artwork that you create is biometrically approved. So there is a certificate that goes along with it, and in order to be able to, like, you know, sell it, you have your fingerprint or you've scanned your eyeball in or whatever. And they're trying to tie that now to your art. So all of these fanboys are saying, yeah, rah, rah, you know, Adobe, the big corporate, you know, Hydra, that is, you know, pushing for this certification process. These artists have no idea what they're cheering for when they're saying they hate AI art because it's stealing from artists. Well, guess what? All of those people that have submitted to Adobe stock, all of their art, not only did they get fleeced, but now they're using your art for their AI systems. So you're cheering on basically the most evil, like, possible outcome for this technology. So
this is the same thing that happened in the coding space with code interpreter being trained off of all sorts of open source code. People who would be
people just don't know.
If you ask them 10 years prior, they'd be against that.
Misplaced anger.
If I could make a point, I've been doing like Twitter Spaces and talking to like EACC people, which are, you know, accelerate AI as fast as possible ideology, which basically I am anyways. But I've been talking to them, and, you know, someone was like, how do we like present our ideas to the public? How do we make it so that the public has a genuinely positive vibe towards like AI in general and the potential that it could bring us all, right? And, you know, like you have a few people like talking back and forth about like, oh, well, we could, you know, we just need like this or that, or this level of speaking, this level of marketing, like people get interested in, and here's the positive, here's the argument. I was like, you don't need any arguments. You just need to keep building good technology. So the argument for AI art being accepted is just fucking beauty. Right? You're just going to be like, holy shit, that looks good. I'm so happy that exists. Like, that's the main thing is like, so as time goes on, like, we're not even seeing the beginning of AI art where there's just, you're going to see shit that's going to make you cry. Like undeniably, like it's going to immediately capture your soul. And you're going to be in love with whatever you just saw. And that's the ultimate argument that I give. You just keep creating, and the public will follow you once it's a scenario where they love what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the human attention and the emotion it draws, right? Human attention and the emotion that draws from people. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think I feel the same way about the film Hollywood industry as well, where it's like, you guys have an issue with this, which you guys are worse than the general art community when it comes to this kind of stuff. You guys produce shit.
100%.
Like, you guys push out dog shit,
Totally.
and then you're like, oh, geez, why didn't people buy it?
It's only got worse too.
The amount of hypocrisy, you've made it the most elite industry feasible, which the fine art community has done as well. They've made it extremely elite, where you could be making fantastic art, and then someone could be producing, which that's fine. Like, I understand that not all art needs to be traditional art. That's not, and not every film has to be everything. You can make a art film. There's plenty of art films that a lot of people are like, I hated that, and I was like, I actually really like that. Oh, you didn't understand it. I'm not going to say that, right? But there is things like that. But there was a time when people really liked going to the movie theater. They liked going to movies. They liked buying them on DVD. They liked collecting them on Blu-ray. They kept up with these actors. They're like, my life is movies, and most of that has died away. And none of that has to do with AI. That has to do with the industry itself being sort of eating itself alive due to money grabbing and a lack of creativity. So now you have individuals who, I could make and produce and eventually in some point in time a movie all on my own. I won't need the industry anymore. And so now and that's the point of all these mediums, is to create content. That's the only point, is to be creative.
Yep.
All the other stuff is a secondary, maybe even tertiary. It's just a necessity by design to make a profit. But if you're no longer in a position
for control,
if you're no longer in a scenario where that's a necessity, then this is the best possible outcome.
Yep.
Everyone gets to create, everyone gets to share, but that the control goes away, right? The control over an industry, the control over what gets made and what doesn't. People lose out on that, and I think there's a lot of issue with that.
Yeah, that's where like a little the butt hurtness comes from. Like, it's, they don't, the elite industry, Hollywood is in trouble. Yes, it is, because if they don't own the entertainment, then they're gonna kill somebody to get back control over it. It's a lot like territory, and they've got their territory, they've got it claimed, and they'll defend it. So
they're losing territory every day.
Yeah, and they're losing territory every day. But just to your other point is like, how many years will it take for AI art in its current form to be considered traditional art? You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point.
Because like a nostalgia or everything.
There'll also be like a nostalgia for the time where it couldn't do hands.
That was already there. I was trying to make that point.
We're already there. Yeah.
One year.
Look at this. It couldn't do text. It couldn't do text.
I love it.
There's a third leg on this woman.
100%. Is it?
You couldn't do version 1 anymore. You can't do version 2 of things anymore. You can't revisit those art pieces anymore. You can't even.
I think the person who made that intended that third leg on that woman.
Are you sure?
Well,
there's some of that on purpose, hey John?
I'm pretty sure.
I think they might have done that one on purpose, buddy. I don't know what you were looking at, but
you ever seen the meme
I think they had some intention.
You ever seen the meme with the little mermaid with the 6 legs?
Well,
oh no!
With Tree Mansion, we're trying to beat that aspect too. Where I stock photo and Getty Images, the big echelon of stock imagery and art. They take like 80% from the artist. That's crazy.
Wow.
Like, well, that's making an art piece, and they take 80%.
So you spend $3,000 on a photo shoot.
It's just robbery.
And then they take 90% of that or 80% of that, and then after that, they're using it because it's certified and it's used on their website. It's okay to put it into AI. Like, people haven't thought this through yet. And it's like, this is where it goes back to open source and distributed networks and
decentralization.
AI. Yeah, decentralize it and making sure that everyone has the tools to create these things. Because even like, well, and back to the other point, it was disco. When I was using Disco Diffusion, I was creating all kinds of weird art. That is already historical. Like, Disco Diffusion is pretty much out the window now, and like, it doesn't. People can't create that stuff anymore. V1 Midjourney gone.
I see 7 fingers. I see 7 fingers being in a gallery, in art, like a museum, even in a museum. But in like 20, 50 years from now, like back then,
just prompt it, just prompt it. Okay, make this, but as if you were version 1, Midjourney, whatever.
As if.
Yeah.
Still
as if.
very hard to do. Still hard to do.
I know. I'm very.
The virtual museums
Fascinating
will
stuff.
certainly be interesting because it'll have all
They
of
should
these
be
just, yeah.
Fascinating. Absolutely. Gentlemen, great discussion. My daughter is here and I need to spend some time with her. So
Most
yeah, no
important thing in the
problem.
world.
so
Oh,
I
I
loved
wanna get away
talking
with
to
that.
you guys. Yeah, and I want to
Yeah,
do this
no.
again. Yeah. So
Can we keep Michael?
jump in and I
sure, yeah.
suppose you
We'd
can
like
keep
to hold him
Michael this
hostage
time.
for now. We got some
Remind-
stuff to beat him
He's
with.
a bit of a doomer.
I
so
might need to
just
have-
good luck with that.
Can I call you, Justin? I might need some help.
Yeah. I'm on speed dial.
He's
for-
on
We're gonna
daddy
keep
duty.
him
Don't leave him alone.
hostage as
Yeah, of course.
a bargaining
for as
tool to
long
get
as
you
you
back
want.
on.
Yeah, they might ask you for a ransom or something.
Okay,
You go have a
gentlemen.
good time, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yes,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you, guys. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Absolutely.
Man, that guy. No, I'm just kidding. I like that guy.
I think he's still in the stream.
Mike doesn't work.
Oh no! Whoa! Sorry, it's a glitch.
Hey, I didn't want to interrupt, by the way, but your webcam, by the way, Johnny, is like
Mhm.
off sync with your mic again. I forgot
I'll turn
about
it
it
on
till
and
just
back
now.
off.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. But anyways, something I wanted to mention, Michael, is
How's that?
speak again. Oh yeah, you made it
A little bit
worse.
better?
You made it so much worse. Okay, we'll just let
I'm
him
just
do that.
messing with you. Is it actually?
Oh.
Is it actually worse? I was
It's
just not
terrible.
I'm sorry.
It's literally worse.
Okay,
You
well,
Just
somehow
a
made it
guest.
worse.
I
Okay.
can't critique. I'm just a guest. Yeah.
all I did was turn it on and back off. I don't know what I've done.
Listen, I don't know why I bring him here. He doesn't help. Doesn't do anything. I'm kidding.
The one thing I had was my looks, and now my face is burnt. So that's all I had.
Did you catch any
They weren't
fish?
that good, anyways. No, I was a golf tournament. It was a golf tournament for telecommunications. It was a golf scramble. So it was all people
Okay.
in the telecom industry, and I was shooting the golf ball cannon.
Oh, I don't know what that
And getting
means, but
drunk.
okay.
Oh, well, I can imagine
So
what that is.
so basically, you got to think of these scrambles. A lot of these people don't play a ton of golf, so they're not pros. So when you get like a par 5 and it's got this maybe pond in between, I basically am like, hey, look, you can drive it yourself. I can shoot the cannon, or you can shoot the cannon, and we'll see what it'll give you. And I'll shoot the cannon, and I'll get a real good one right on the fairway, and they're like, yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that. Yeah, we don't need to drive. We're gonna take that one. But it's just on one hole. So it was fun. They gave me a lot of beer. Some people were trying to give me like tips, and I was like, no, I don't need tips. That's not what this is. This is a charity. You don't have to don't give me money.
Why didn't you
This is
just
not
say
the
I
yes?
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just extract the tips and donate them. Anyways, Michael, something I did want to mention, by the way, is there's levels of like Hollywood destruction that like are not even kind of discussed, because Japan's doing the whole like Japan and India are doing the whole we're not copyright enforcement on shit with AI stuff. So you take all your Disney movies and train models on them, right? And now you can create you can create infinite Mickey Mouse, right? So there's the other aspect to it where not only will you have eventually we'll get to a level of sophistication, right? Where not only will you have these AI art generations of Mickey Mouse or something to that effect, right? You will have full-on movies being generated within the likeness of however someone wants it, and like up on torrent sites. And that will piss them off more than just putting up Mickey Mouse. So that like you're just creating your own monsters by not trying to foster something friendly about all of this, because they're just not going to care. And you're basically pretty screwed on this angle, in my opinion. Like Hollywood is really just shooting itself in the foot constantly, consistently.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of I talked about like the censorship earlier, is like what it also is doing is it's taking the power away from the general Hollywood. They've had like a monopoly on all
infrastructure. Yeah.
on all production, I guess like the spaghetti westerns were a fluke, in various European films, but for the most part, the central hub of creation for media in the Western media has been through Hollywood, and they're losing that power. So it's pissing them off, and you're kind of just headed towards this degrees of a lot of people kind of talk about like things they don't like that they're doing in new movies, right? And I got my own gripes, private ones, but the point is I can make the movie however I want. You can't stop me. That's coming. Like, so
yeah, it's kind of where the Congress comes in, right? The ability to just create whatever you want to see.
You cut yourself out of the equation entirely by pushing too hard. We would have nobody wants to learn how to do this AI stuff. Like at the lower level, like a lot of like people just want to see stuff. So it takes effort.
I hear a lot of that.
So it's becoming easier and easier to work with all of this, and it's going to get better. So if you're not controlling that in any way, and for example, with the Congress, at least you get paid, right? Like for having your likeness out there. They're barely doing that for people. Just like I said with the AI voices, or not with the AI voices, but just in particular voice acting. And then another aspect is like music people. Their contracts are like 95% don't go to them. They get like 5%. That's it. Like, okay,
Spotify is one of the worst for that. Yeah.
Yeah. They get $10 million or something for a tour, but really like their tour raised a couple $100 million. It happens all the time. And I think there was an artist on Rogan a little while back called Jelly Roll. He's like a entertaining guy who does like country rap type stuff, but he mentioned that his contracts for like 90-10 to him. He gets 10%. And he said now it's pretty good for like this genre.
So I wonder if you could just record your voice and then keep it under a NFT or some kind of blockchain or some kind of technology. And then if you have a certain like range of your voice, and then if anyone gets in within that range, you sue them or there's some kind of fight to that.
See, I
so
think
if you were in a courtroom and you played the one voice versus another voice, and if it matches within a certain range, you have a legal action. You have a case there.
Well, this is. I don't think blockchain technology is necessarily the vector.
It's just an example.
But you would have AI that can detect anything like that. They already use it for copyright. There's like lower level stuff, but copyright detection on YouTube has done this for half a decade now, right? Or probably more, but it can detect music, right? And you'll probably get that where maybe there'll be degrees to where if you voice clone like several different voices together and create your own novel voice, it might be able to detect that voice in there, which ones are being used. So there could be degrees of that. My only issue with stuff like that is like, how do you enforce it ultimately? Like it's a difficult thing to enforce.
How do you enforce any of this? Yeah. And Disney's having a hard time with their own stuff, let alone anything that anyone's copying. I think it was about 5 years ago now, maybe only about 3 years ago, where Disney decided to take every frame of their movie and splice into NFTs and put it on the blockchain. And so if you have anything of the likeness, they had hoped to use that as a means of fighting. But at the same time, you're right. Like if you can stream anything you want on your device for free, do they have enough enforcement to go into your house and say, oh, no, you can't do that?
Yeah, this is why
going back to the
go ahead.
Going back to the voice thing, because I just did a little quick because I'm a little bit unfamiliar. Copyright law is very complicated, at least in the States,
especially now.
And so let's say you've got a specific voice as a singer, okay, and then you die. Sorry, right? You're dead. You're not making any more music, but people really like that distinct voice that you did. Well, I am a great impersonator, okay? And then I sing new songs that I've written, but I do it in the exact same style or very, very close to what you're doing. I don't think that there's any legal precedent as long as I in no way, shape, or form am trying to pass myself off as you. I don't think there's any precedent for legal action on that, because I'm not saying I'm you, so there's no infringement on that. I'm not using any of your lyrics. I'm not using anything that I'm simply mimicking the vocal patterns, and they do not have copyright in any form on vocal patterns, which is why, like in films, especially comedies, a character will play a character who's reminiscent of an older comedian, or they'll like, see here, yeah, but there's like someone who sounded like that in a movie, and they're kind of doing that, that sort of, and it's almost like doing an accent at that point, but there are specific iconic actors and singers who talk in a certain way, who are being mimicked, and there's no real legal grounds to be like, oh, that guy, I think he's trying to pretend to sound like me. So I think you're pretty cool on that.
Yeah,
Especially in the comedy space, stand up and all that too. It's like, as long as you're impersonating and you're clarifying that you're impersonating, doesn't matter. You're good. Yeah. I think Drake is the only one I've heard.
Cover bands.
I think Drake is the only artist I know of currently that is in court trying to fight against some AI that sounds just like him, creating different songs but in his likeness. There might be more.
I mean, I guess good luck to him. Like, even if he wins, it's just like how many Frank Sinatra songs are out there, right? Like, how do you enforce all of this? That's my like ultimate like issue is like, you can make examples of a few people and try to scare people off the trail, but you're kind of like,
you can't stop everyone.
The cat is out of the bag for stuff like this. Like, I recently talked to a bit of a damn lunatic on Twitter Spaces, like I don't know, maybe a week ago. But
I feel like we run into a lot of those.
No, dude, like I can't wait for Twitter Spaces to have video. We're gonna have fun over there. They're crazy people. We need desktop support for Twitter Spaces, but X Spaces, Twitter Spaces, right? There's a guy on there like this is where like the censorship attitudes are gonna lead, where he's basically like, I don't know anything about the guy, but he's claiming he's some sort of military software contractor, and they're like building drone swarms and shit like that. And whether or not he's just straight up LARPing, he seems like the URA type, like, the ex-military, whatever. Again, all could be a LARP, but his effective thing is like, oh, well, we used to kill nuclear scientists that were, in Iran in various ways, so that they can never get the nukes, because it's really bad if Iran gets the nukes because America says so, right? That's your problem, right? And then his whole thing is like, oh, all we got to do is start killing all the AI lab people, and if basically he's saying what we should do is we either offer you death or sanctuary, like we did the Nazi scientists, the Nazi nuclear scientists, but for AI in America. So you should come here and work for us, or we'll kill you. That's his like legitimate like. Now again, he could be LARPing, and I don't know all of that, but the point is that I take him at his. He's advocating like just straight up droning people that are into AI in other parts of the world. And if they don't come here, we kill them. And it's like, this is like part of the attitudes like that censorship does, where then we head towards all AI can only be generated by, or it can only be like a few separate labs. So this is another aspect to, well, what are you with? You're an an AI art person, right? You're a potential propaganda arm of any government in the world. You can make pristine propaganda, right? You're a problem now, right? Like, especially if you're developing that, there's all these vectors for like, I can just make up any excuse to kill you because, I'm like this imperial minded person that we got to make sure Big Daddy America is still, Team America World Police, and we keep a track on everything, and no AGI gets out of control, because that's definitely a thing that can happen. And It's just at some point censorship gets down to like the enforcement is killing people. So is that really what you want to do? So I don't think people
Then the guy
realize,
who's trying to make the woman with the third leg in Iran gets taken out because he's making AI art.
yeah, well, that's the point I'm making is like, if you're advocating censorship, at some point you're advocating killing people, because there's no way to like stop this all holds bar over the internet. There's too much technology around torrenting where people are just going to move shit through the internet without your permission. It's just completely possible. But what you'd be able to do is some sort of effectively like scare tactics, which is killing people. And I could be just overreacting. Go ahead.
That's always been the case, though, hasn't it?
Of course.
Always been the case for just about everything.
Yeah, silence.
It's just you're just interested in the aspect that it's getting easier and easier to fall in that category, is what you're saying. Like, yeah, I censorship and all that's always been there to keep up the echelon of governance over media, ultimately, whatever kind of media. Because then at the same, so that's always been that. That's actually always been a threat. Look at the cartoon artists who would use political cartoons to get their political views across. Either try to be silenced or maybe threatened or what have you, but we still have artists doing that. And I think art is like one of the weapons as humans have to combat censorship, to combat being silenced. And it is one thing that we should all kind of consider as one of the most human ways of communication, and thus should be guarded with perhaps our life.
Yeah.
Well, and it's always been the role of the jester, the king he's allowed to say things, because how pitiful of a king would you be to execute the jester, right? How pathetic of a king. That's only going to look bad. And we don't really hold the
lighthearted, even though it's dark.
We don't really hold our current structures to that same, degree. Like if they go after something, we're not like, I feel like most people, especially within the realm of comedy, where we're pretty okay with being like, you can't do that anymore, and that's not okay. You can't say that. Or like, oh, you can't criticize. You can't like there are people who are like, both left and right, who are like, well, they may not agree with me, but they're the elected official, such and such. So I'm not going to criticize. I'm not going to naysay. I'm not going to say things that are bad. So I think you get some of that as well within the political sphere.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then how much you can kind of, and how many topics you can talk about just under the rug of comedy. Oh, I was just joking. No matter how much information I can give you, it's like, but I was just joking. So, or as Jobify mentions, like, I'm not sure if this person was serious or not, but he spoke about very particular topics. However, I'm not sure if he was LARPing or not. And so maybe he could at the end of at the end of his segment of information, he just says, "Oh, by the way, I was just LARPing." But if you do your research, but I'm just LARPing.
Yeah, it's a very like heavy-handed joke, I would say, to for the very least, of like killing AI researchers, just in case, you never know. But another like I spent a significant amount of my youth like listening to like edgy radio. One of the main shows was the Opie and Anthony show, and they used to document all the instances where people are getting canceled pre that being a term, where you'd make a off-color joke and you're fired from your radio show forever, right? They won't even let you on another radio station. You're screwed. And when they were coming up, the strategy was to get kicked off because another radio show would take you on because you're now popular because you said some crazy stuff or did some wacky things, right? And then people want to listen to you. So there's a degree of like you used to kind of get rewarded for doing things out of the ordinary or that were very edgy, you name it, because that was countercultural at the time, because you had like polite Christian society in America, so like saying really raunchy crap on the air got you a ton of attention, right? Now the things have like shifted, where we're kind of like headed in this other direction, where like the pendulum has swung the entire other way, where if you start saying things back in the direction that previously would have gotten you you'd be fine on the radio, you wouldn't get kicked off, you saying things like that will get you kicked off now. So there's just a general aura of like censorship that is continually progressing in one way. But X.com has done a lot for us as far as that goes, because like half the artists that I know that do AI art, I've found them on X. So there's no censorship for it in any way. But you go to other forums and stuff where, especially on Reddit, if you saw certain Reddit forums, they were censoring as much AI art as they could. Now, for them, I actually get why they would do that. They're like, hey, we only want handcrafted art here, right? So there's arguments for that, but ultimately you're kind of screwed, because they can just sneak handcrafted art in that just was generated by AI. So there's degrees to this of like, it just kind of ultimately comes to the honesty of the person who created the art on whether or not it was done by hand and then posting it, right? So I guess you'd be able to like tell, depending on how fast they posted things, like this wouldn't be possible for something to be done by hand like this. So
and to what end as well, like, and why would you have such guardrails? And is it the labor of love? I know AIers that have spent months on one piece. So and it'd be a combination of hand painted and AI art or AI, right? And at what point is it a matter of labor that goes into the art piece that they're trying to regulate, or is it the amount of hours, or is it the amount of creativity? At what point is handcrafted?
Because they're gonna have to get rid of a lot of shit.
Right. Yeah. And then is it
a lot of stuff that's been made over the past 40 years? I don't think is going to live up to the standards that they now want to have. Especially, going back to that toilet. How much labor and love went into him picking out that toilet and putting it in that art installation? How much?
And did he make that toilet by hand,
did he have to go do?
I think he just bought the damn thing. I think he bought the fucking toilet, and I think he put it up, and he's like, "That's art." And everyone was like,
he had to find the perfect one. He went to Lowe's even.
He could have. He could have. He could have went to 40 different Home Depots. He could have. Hell, he could have. I don't know.
Who's checking all those boxes exactly, John?
But that's the difference between me saying, what a bunch of shit, and then me being like, that shouldn't be considered art at all in any way, shape, or form. No one should be able to enjoy that. We should regulate that legally. Like me poo-pooing, talking down about something, that's everyone should have the right to do that when it comes to art, because that's you can criticize. I disagree with the concept you can't criticize art, because all art, you have a right as an individual to criticize anything, especially art. You're like, I don't like it, I think they should have done that. That's fine. But then to make some sort of regulatory decision on it, or this is bad for this, and so you can't do this, or you can't produce this art anymore, with some minor little area. There's some areas where I'm like, yeah, you probably shouldn't make that.
There should probably be degrees of socially enforced standards where maybe this toilet sucks. So someone said, intelligent canvas here said that it sounds more like money laundering. So you got the money laundering toilet. So that's another aspect to it. So, you flush it down the drain and it's clean.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of jokes that could be made.
The art community has never laundered money. I don't know what you're talking about. That's not real.
Yeah, that was a problem with the crypto art community, is a lot of money laundering. So
there's probably a lot of companies that move in onto these art pieces and do the laundering. Isn't the artist?
I'm sure the individual artist is not actually involved.
Very often the artist is like just your kind of patsy. I mean, this is the thing with, I believe, the Epsteins, If anyone knows about their whole story, where they like effectively adopted some artist, they had her for a while, and they would have her create pieces, and that was part of their like tax scheme, is like having this young woman create art within their various places they had her. So avoiding all the other scandals, ignoring all that, they legitimately just keep an artist on call that's like making shit for them to just write off. And you know, this is like a real thing where like there are some artists out there that live this life. They're like in the house of a billionaire, and they're creating shit that can be laundered. So
the artists might have no idea how much their pieces of art are being sold for either. So the artist, there could be such a disconnect that they think it's a beautiful piece, and they're just happy that it's sold. They don't know for how much.
Right.
I am curious. Is there a price tag on that toilet, Johnny?
No, I don't think that's it's not the
still
original
got the
one.
Home Depot price tag on the back. That's what I'm picturing. You know, it's still got the little tag on it.
And Banksy's a good example too. I mean, the cement wall, people just kind of went out and carved that wall out and sold it for $2 million, stuff like that. It's the art is the it's the eye of the beholder, the value, right, and how much someone's going to part their money for it. You can't really regulate art as a whole. Any attempts to is kind of like what they're trying to do with Adobe, or just kind of control it through money's switching hands at some point with them, right? So,
yeah, I think that's like the ultimate point of all this is like at some point, like being mad at the people doing AI art or developing this is like you're just shooting the wrong person, because they've been screwing artists forever now. Like just not good people running things at the top there.
And they realize how much of that control is slipping through their fingers, so they're trying to rope it back in and say, hey, how can we get this control back? And you might be right on Jobify, it might be just too far gone that they can never get that kind of control that they had before. But time will tell, especially if all artists kind of bow down to the regulation, then it might be very easy, especially with the fear factor, but hopefully not. Maybe it will turn into a complete decentralized landscape, and everyone has their own like AI generative system. But I would think they would go after the people who are creating the AI systems first before they go after an artist. Jobify.
Well,
in terms of censorship, like they need to hit the source rather than the people using the tool. They kind of go after the people who make the tools first.
Well, there's a general like decentralization that will happen with AI, where if you've heard anything about like how Emod talks, it's like roughly 200 megabytes to 2 gigabytes is going to be all the code needed in the world to generate all the code needs in the world. Does that make sense? So you only need 2 gigabytes max of lines of code that will then generate all the code that the world needs. Right? So that file isn't hard to share, is the problem. So you can then, from that point on, build stuff out of that stack, just as long as you let it keep working and keep your computer on and tell it what to do. And you're effectively going to be able to do various things with other image generation stuff, where it's just going to build you software stacks to make your open source, not open source, but solo stuff, like whatever thing that you want your AI to do for you, it will build stacks that work with the image modality stuff to generate videos for you. It'll just build the equipment that it needs within the software space to run it on even your phone, to be honest. So the point I'm making there is it's going to be something that is so impossible to censor, and something that people talk about a lot is the people in Congress were proposing, we're going to make it so that you can't run illegal AI software at some point. There'd be a standard, and well, that means that you have to put a backdoor on every computer in the world, which, if you know anything about computers, good luck, right? That's a problem for anyone to even attempt to do. They could do it on all new computers, potentially, but the irony of the software itself is that eventually the backdoor just gets patched by your own AI and protects your computer that you bought. It already had a backdoor. So there's degrees to that where it just sends in false information and pretends the backdoor is still open. So there's no red flags raised. So we're fundamentally headed towards a not so private internet, as well as a far more private internet in general, just because of the power that AI will give you as far as asking it to do things. And it may even get recommendations from other AIs that are, friends of yours, frankly, on what to do. And so it's going to be very difficult from a software perspective to stop all of this just because of the potential software that is coming.
Okay, and are you talking about like a her situation where it's like your own personal iOS
Absolutely
operating system?
Mm-hmm.
Or just OS rather? Cool. Yeah, 100% agree that'll be part of the decentralized. Oh, John's got something.
Back to the important topic at hand, the toilet. Okay.
Oh boy.
So I'll give a little bit more credit to the toilet guy. This was 1917 when he did this. Okay. So, and I think it was kind of like ready-made art, and it was like he's like, the reason he picked it is because it looked disagreeable, right? It kind of looked ugly anyways. And
The
so
emotion behind it, yeah.
well, it's like just the beauty and just, which there's something to be said that there's tons of things that are designed a certain way that we just accept as design choices, but we don't see them as artistic. Total credit to that, right? There were 17 authorized versions of the fountain that were created. The worth on those anywhere between like $1 and $5 million. So, yeah. So one to 5 million. So the original was lost, but there were multiple recreations. I think the artist actually made those recreations. But if it was made in like 1970 or 80, I think I would give less credit because it's. But 1917, I will say that is quite an original idea to put in. I don't know what the art community was like in the early 1900s. But being like, yeah, I'm gonna put a toilet up there. I think that's kind of fun.
I'm sure there's probably some jackass in Rome that did it before. He threw a latrine up in the middle of the square or something funny. Well, granted, I think they did that already. But
in the grand scheme of things, too, as AI gets better, doesn't that make fine art, even more valuable? Doesn't that make paintings even more valuable? Isn't there a shift too of like, the aspect of creating, and inspiration? Like everyone probably will want an iOS, like you're saying, Joby, that has their own kind of parameters. But there's also the aspect of like, you don't create a complete vacuum of your ideas. You want to have a community of ideas ultimately, right? So you'll be interested in what other people are saying and be interested in what people create, both what they can create immediately digitally, but also will we be able to ever see an art piece such as the toilet ever again? Will that ever be created again? So if we do see a physical piece like that again, I think it would be even more valuable than later, ultimately. Yeah, because there'd be less wants to do that, right?
Well, they're the original like NFTs. At least what people want NFTs to be is that you have this physical thing. There's only one of it in the world, and it's the Mona Lisa, right? So there'll be degrees to like, this person literally did this with their hands, so there will be more value to it, to degrees of that, right? I'm not entirely sure how much like, because AI art fundamentally is abundant, right? So abundance doesn't generate a ton of value. What will generate value in that case is mainly how useful or beautiful or things like that. So it's more like you can publish something to Steam and make no money, or you could publish something really good to Steam and make a ton of money. The barrier to entry to create art has become significantly lower but it levels the playing field as far as like there are it doesn't necessarily level the playing field on the high end. On the high end, with any skill set there is, if they make it easier on any level, you're still going to be the best because you were the best when there was no tool like this. That's effectively happens in most athletics, especially happens in video games, which is, I guess that's a pretty good example. But they like, there's a game called Rust, and they changed the way like the spray pattern on the main gun that everyone uses, the AK, and other guns, where it now follows just a more normal traditional FPS thing. And you had these people training for thousands, sometimes like 1,000 hours to learn how to do this particular spray pattern that there was before, and they would immediately have an advantage over anyone, right? But then they changed that, and guess what? The same people are still the best at the game despite it, because they're still that dedicated person. So it's the same thing.
They'll discover another thing too, right? Because they're so ahead of it, what everyone's like discovering, they found out months ago, and now they're already headed to the next thing rather than everyone catching up to what was the old strategy. They're kind of setting the tone in that game.
So it's kind of a similar thing with like art, is that like at the end of the day, even if someone can create something better than you in some art style through some AI art thing, it doesn't discount the fact that you as a human can do that. And in fact, there will always be elite level humans that will be able to they'll be able to compete with machine and take inspiration from machine. There's general, like, I don't know if you've ever seen, well, of course you have, the people that like do those ultra 300-400 hour ultra realistic pencil drawings of someone's face, and it's like a picture, and you're like, how the hell did you do that? And it's thousands of hours of training to do something like that, and an innate talent as well, but just dedication to their craft. Like, it takes hours and hours of grinding to be able to do this stuff. And it basically, your grind is never discounted by something that just comes along and makes it easier. In fact, you're more admirable in general.
Right. Exactly. That's what
I think we can also kind of. So we can, maybe this is a strange comparison, but so actually the last 3 homes that my family's lived in have all been homes that someone individually drafted themselves, right? Some of them a little bit clearly better conceptually than others. There was one house where doors, actually 2 doors would hit, but it was also older people, so they didn't always finish the house, so we would add stuff on. But most houses are pretty set, like the majority, right? Obviously, if you get out in like really rural areas, you're going to have a lot more of that. But like manufactured homes used to be seen as like, oh, manufactured home, I don't want that. However, that's not really looked down on anymore, manufactured homes, because they're done pretty high quality. And so apartments are done pretty set, right? When they build these structures, and even when they build like a suburban area, people are not like, oh no, the home, it looks the same as the others. But even though you have that sort of cookie cutter thing going on, you still have people who are making their own home. And I think it's the same way with art. You're going to have a lot of generative stuff, but there's always okay, so a manufactured home is a home that's it's prefab, it's prefabricated. So they've already got all the piece parts cut out, the template for it. So the way that houses used to be made was kind of, you decide what it's going to look like, and then they kind of came into the realm of, okay, we're building all basically the same houses in this suburban sprawl, and then maybe there's small differences on yard, or they've got maybe a different room set up, kind of like how apartments are within an apartment complex. You got like 4 or 5 styles, and they just kind of sparse that out. There was a time where people were like, oh, I would never want that. That's so ununique. But even despite how popular that is, there are still people that are making these individual concept homes. Okay, and there always will be, and it's the same way with art. My mother if she's going to get a piece of art, like a painting or anything, she's like, I'm just going to get it from someone individually. I'm going to commission them to make me. It's expensive, right? But she has that luxury. I don't have that luxury. I'd take a PNG, blow it up, and put it on a wall. That's that's where. But there's always going to be someone who says, okay, I want this done from an artisan. And it's the same way with food. There's mass manufactured food. If you're hungry, it's cheap, it's easy way to get it. But if I want a cake that was done by a professional baker that me and him talked about how it's going to be tiered, what icing, what are the ingredients, let me taste test it. There are still avenues for that, and those will never go away. And that's just what people don't realize is that even if it's what it allows is accessibility for people who do not have the finances for those types of things, right? So if you think in the 1800s, in the 1700s, the average person couldn't drive over and buy a very nice high quality cake every single day. Most people can do that if they want. They can eat a cake every day, right? So Victorian era as well, you can't eat a cake every day. You know how expensive that is, how hard it is to get on those individual ingredients. It's not going to happen. Now, I don't suggest doing it, right? But you could go to Walmart every day and get a cake. Now, it's not going to be as high quality as an artisan made cake, right? But you now have accessibility. And that's what's important. I'm not allowed to do that. I used to do that, but Jasmine doesn't like when we go to Walmart. I'm like, we should get this cake. She's like, what? Why the hell do you need a cake? I was like, well, cake is good. She's like, no, vegetables. I'm like, oh, okay.
Okay. Well,
I haven't eaten a vegetable in 10 years. I don't know what to tell you.
Motivation too. Like the Mona Lisa, and the amazing art that we've seen in the past made. We still talk about today. And when we have artists that want to spend months on an art piece, 6 months, maybe a year on an art piece, we should always celebrate that. And with the technology we have now, we could do kind of the sculpture of David, and we could do some of this architecture. We just don't. A lot of it because of motivation, but we just kind of, the industry kind of beats down the artist to not care about the motivation behind the art. It's just more about the money behind the art. And I think, yeah,
if I could, I also think like if we think about like the net positive of AI, right? If we assume things go well, people are going to need hobbies, right? And one of them is going to be just sitting around making art. And, even if nobody's looking, like there's going to be plenty of artists that just love making things.
They love it.
And
I still like drawing. As you get
to the post-scarcity society, your life becomes about your leisure activities to some degree. Your pursuits, your struggles will all be there in some degree. Perhaps some people will just be doing it virtually. It doesn't really matter what medium it is. But there's always going to be room for the artist to create something. And another aspect to like, I have a friend who's a very good graphics designer and a bit of an artist, and he loves AI because he can think of a thing, start creating it and drafting it up in AI first, and then he can make it after. Like he loves that he can start flushing out his idea, and he finds that he makes better art afterwards because he had this ability to draft it a bunch of times. I mean, people don't really know, like the some of the ancient paintings were painted thousands of times with massive amount of artists, right, who are sitting there copying the same thing over and over again to make effectively drafts until we get the perfect one. So kind of like what we do now with AI art, it's kind of funny. There are past scenarios where people making fine art at the highest level, hired by royalty to paint this piece, you name it, they had a fleet of painters sitting in rooms painting the same damn painting over and over again. Her smile needs to be like this. We need to get it more like this. And then the final artist will come in and effectively finish everything up. And this is like a real thing that happened in certain cases. You'd have a fleet of people painting stuff, and there's even weird stuff that like not a lot of people know about. Like some of the some of those old like biblical art that you see, right? When people were writing out, and the monks would write out and copy art, they learned how to copy. There's a technique, right, where they didn't know anything about how to make the art, but they would effectively copy it very high quality. And the way that they would do that is cross their eyes. I'm not kidding. This would make them nearsighted in like their future. But they're part of the thing that they would do is cross their eyes. And when you cross your eyes, you can create and see something in double, right? So they would over time learn this technique, cross their eyes, and a direct image picture of the little like biblical art would show up on the other page next to it, and they would be able to trace it as you would. Every kid had something where they would trace something, right? Put the your Spider-Man picture that you had on your folder or something directly underneath your paper, and you'd be able to trace it. But these people did it with their eyes, right? Because it was a technique they could do that was very fast, and they didn't have more or less kind of thin and see-through paper. It was very thick. So they with this strange ability, found a way to do it, and it really screwed them up in the long term. So there's all degrees of like people don't understand how much like pain like artists have been through to do various things, and this is kind of an example of that, where you're going to have the human generally involved in the processes, and even once you get to the, I talk about it a lot here, is the net positive outcome of AI is that you're going to be able to have a leisure activity, and nobody's taking anything away from the artist. The only thing that, people might think that they're being taken away from is like, oh, you're taking our art jobs away. Well, how many people actually are employed doing art? If you start digging into it, you've maybe got 1% of people that are really good artists who actually make a living doing it. For most people, it's already a hobby. So there's this imaginary money that's being taken away, and it doesn't exist. Does that make sense to you? Am I off base there by saying that?
To an extent, just based on what kind of markets you're looking at globally. So that's a tough question to answer. I'm not quite sure. Ultimately,
I guess it also depends on what are we referring to as so obviously, like in another country, the guy who's making pots, right? And then he makes pots for the village, they buy them, right? So if he was doing that here, we'd consider him an artist, right? Like we would be like, those are handcrafted,
stuff, yeah.
right. So that also kind of the definition of what is art is going to change depending on the culture as well.
Yeah,
So
I'm
if
curious.
we're adding in sort of handcrafted things and stuff like that, but as we've mentioned already, there's always going to be a market for that, and all that's going to do is take the man who makes pottery, instead of it just being, well, that's where everyone buys their pottery. He's going to be able to sell that for a pretty good upcharge, because it has the imperfections and the attention to detail that someone's been doing that for 10 or 15 years, as opposed to the manufacturing of it. So I think for a variety of reasons, um, and this is not even getting into the sort of end of classical concepts of money in exchange of goods, that I think are going to sort of be narratively different in the future. Not even getting into that, but the people that are, to use the term again, artisans in their field, I think that they're going to be able to get more um, for what they're creating if they're creating high quality stuff. I've looked through the internet. I've seen a lot of people that do commission based work that they get paid $5 or $10 that are like, I need more money. I'm like, I wouldn't have paid you a penny for it, because it looks, it looks terrible. Like me personally, I wouldn't have paid you anything for it. I wouldn't have paid you. I'm surprised anyone paid you at all. That's Me personally, though, right? So, like, I think that these people are going to be able to evolve their artistry, right, by augmenting it, and there's always going to be, as an artist, even if I'm working right now, let's say I have the most advanced um, AI art generator, like more advanced than anything anyone here's worked with. I'm still not going to probably make stuff that's as good as someone who has been obviously has the artistic mind, has been creating stuff in the real world already, and has been working with these products with this software, because I do not have the skills developed. I can probably make some cool stuff, but there's still going to be an advantage for those who have engrossed themselves in this technology, just as there would be for someone who's engrossed themselves with drawing or pottery or sculpting. So it's just a shifting of the medium. And as for the idea of the what you had mentioned, Joby, about doing it for your enjoyment. Like, my mother has a very, very nice flower garden. It's gorgeous. We live out in the middle of nowhere. No one sees it but us. So she's not doing it so that other people can, look at it. She's doing it because she wants to look at it. So she's putting that labor and that hobby and that time in, and she's getting the satisfaction out of it. And so there's always going to be that, even if there's never any money to be made off of something, no one is going to be forced to stop creating, right?
Some of the
Ever.
most treasured
Yes.
art for people is like as a parent is the thing that you put on your fridge. Your kid made a doodle. It's mom, dad, and the dog. Right? Like this is art has to have meaning towards you. So this would be like an example. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mike.
and I agree with the maybe the perception of 1% of the artists out there make any kind of profit or make a career off of it, but I think that's mainly because of how restricted it is or how much they get ripped off. As the tools get more accessible, I think there's going to be a huge shift in not only the amount of artists there are, but the creativity that comes out of it, and thus the value that comes out of it. So,
Yeah.
though you might see maybe 5% of the top artists are making any money, might be the case 5 years ago, but now I don't think there's a statistic right now as to what that landscape looks like and what it will look like in the next 5 years. Art's going to explode.
My
And
general
much,
point.
Well, and that's
much with
and that's
every other
what
industry in on the planet because of AI.
well, I think that's the other thing is, like, so me seeing that art where I was like, I wouldn't pay, $40 for it. Maybe I'd pay like five. There's a big difference between me as an individual just having it, and then if I was a company and I paid $5 for it, and then I go and I use that, and then I make $4 million. That is where I think a lot of people are having. That's where a lot of the ethical concerns I think
Well,
present themselves.
and I think that comes back to the same topic that we started with, is the knowledge, the lack of knowledge of what's actually going on,
Hmm.
and the fact that the artist doesn't even know that. Thus, if they did, they might not be at such locations as Joby's mentioning, or they would just sell it for much higher. Like when they
Yeah.
realize that their voice is just being taken and multiplied 1,000 times, maybe they won't necessarily be a voice artist, or maybe they just charge more because they know this is the first and only time that they can record their voice, and then that's it. And then maybe move on to other means of creativity.
Yeah, that's fair
I
enough.
know lots of people that are engineers and contracting plumbers and lawyers that are amazing artists, but they just never really saw the outlet, or they might just doodle on their spare time. But now that this capability is we're entering the next level of humanity. Like this is huge. This is a renaissance, is what we're about to hit, and not just in the art community. Like we can look back at the Renaissance back in the day, where it was kind of bankers funding artists and just kind of bloating the value of art. But now everyone has the capability of making a real impact, and it's back to human attention and emotion that it draws.
Yeah, to make a clear point though, the thing I was saying earlier is more that there's a perceived like money that is being taken right from the artist's hand when there's a AI art generator that can do the same thing as them, quote unquote. Can't quite yet, but the point I'm making is that there's the perception of like, oh, there's this pool of money and now the AI stuff is taking from it. Usually it's probably more on the end of what Johnny's talking about, where It's mainly to do with the people that are producing various media that need this art. They're kind of screwing you, and they've been doing it for a long time. So it's kind of like the aspect you're talking about, where the art may be more valuable as time goes on. It really depends, but we're also, it's hard to predict each and every little thing about how things are going to go here. But something that Mark and Andreessen talks a bit about is that
Andreessen?
He talks a bit about how there's fundamentally a communist idea of like the pull of labor, right? And there's the theory that there's only so much labor that can be done in the world, and then anything that like takes from that means that like there's mass unemployment. Effectively, it's hard to say, right? If I could go with my inclination, I think that might be correct to a pretty large degree with mass AI and robotics and so on, of mass unemployment. But it's also entirely possible that the jobs are just going to get better for humans as far as they're more fulfilling. We don't have any idea how things could go, is my main point. There could be a scenario where everyone's employed to some degree doing kind of things they want, and there's a monetary system that can support all of that. So it's hard to say like, oh, everything's just going to be taken away and all jobs are going to be automated, all creations automated. That doesn't matter. That might not be true. It's very hard to predict degrees out into the future. And there's also the entire possibility that, like I mentioned before, where it just becomes a thing where we don't really mind. Most things are more or less provided for. Your needs, as far as what you need to survive, is very cheap because robots do it all. I talked to someone kind of wise recently where they said eventually if the robot's doing it, it's free, right? It's a very cheap thing compared to a human doing something, right? So most things in the world get cheaper. So something that is also like a bit of a bugaboo is like textile mills. Or I don't know if anyone's ever seen how those like fine china bowls that have like the neat little flower patterns on them, they're just stamped by a machine, right? You think it's like some old Russian babushka lady like making them in a factory. So no, it's not. It's a stamper. I used to work with a lot of material, kind of like you two are wearing right now, just various materials for my old job, where I would laminate it into prosthetic sockets. People like having like flowers and stuff. If you look at how all that stuff is made, it's just big rollers that like a material goes through and it gets a printed material on it. So there, at every layer, there's tedium that gets automated. And there's also tedium within art that gets automated. I'm sure people who were animators really liked it at some point, but at some point, everything you do can become a job. And if you're not animating something you really want to animate, you might really hate parts of your job. So there's degrees of like,
you're saying some of the jobs freedom that are being removed are jobs that should have gone anyway, much like an in-betweener. Having to do in-betweens in animation is absolutely tedious.
Well, and I think it
takes a particular mindset to do such jobs.
It's interesting when people like the AI lawyer, right? That concept, which a lot of people are like, that's awesome, that's great, right? But like, no one is like, oh my God, think of the lawyers. AI banker, think of the bankers. Oh my goodness, no, they're gonna lose their jobs. If someone came out with AI landlord, right? People would be in the streets
and like,
we got to get this technology now. We got to get this technology as soon as possible because it's misplaced anger. So the people who, and don't get me wrong, I feel that way sometimes too. There are people that are very wealthy and taking advantage of situations, right? And so it's very easy for us to say, okay, let's get rid of their jobs, right? Because they're assholes and they're getting all the goodies, and I'm not getting anything. But that's kind of bringing those preconceived past notions on wealth and money and things like that, and it's projecting it onto this new mode of sort of living. So then we're like, okay, well, if we're going to replace like any sort of more like downtrodden job or people that struggle a little bit, then people are going to be like, oh, no, you can't do that. Those people, we feel bad for those people. You can't replace them. And it's like, well, if we're going to replace one area, we're going to do it for everything, and it's going to be good for everybody. So it's definitely very much just depending on what you think of the people in that job sector are. It feels like if people are okay with the job being replaced.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah,
Also, the shift of AI is much like the internet. When before the internet, and then when the internet happened, it's like, okay, so how many jobs are going to be replaced because people can just order online, or even before that, when digital art was coming out on the computer, like it's a huge shift, and we're only in the first year of it. Look how much the internet's changed,
that
and
is true.
how easy use.
It is technically only the first year of like real AI coming to.
I know it's 40 years old, but at the same time, it's much like the internet. Like the internet was way before commercialized, right? It was invented, and then it was housed on only strict servers. It was only until it was commercialized that the internet really kind of took off through email. And then when you can send an image via email, it's like, okay, now we got something commercial. And then once businesses realized they needed a website or they didn't exist, boom, now you got the internet exploding everywhere. With AI, as soon as businesses realize they need to be part of AI and understand why they need it, it'll explode much like the internet, and if not further. Like you're talking about, independent operating systems will be huge, and the amount of ideas and communication, be able to actually filter what's in and out. It's going to be immense.
This is technology. AI is technology that's been in the works, or at least had some iteration of it since like the late to mid 50s, right? So this is like 70 years in the making.
70 years?
And we are now in the first, well, because there's, well, and obviously by no means what we would consider
even just
AI
imagination today of it is.
Yeah, well, it's been around even longer than that, right? So if we're going by that, but so this is something that has had so much culmination behind it. And
Danger, Will Robinson.
Right. But so it's crazy to think that within, as far as public use, public access, sort of wide dispersion, we are in the real first year of it being, actually applicable to the average person. And it's already come. Like if you look at Gen 1 Stable Diffusion versus like what now, and the video, if you've seen, I can't remember which video it was, but the AI
Runway.
video, the Gen 1
Runway.
versus,
Probably Runway.
the Gen 1 versus I think it's like Gen 2 or 3 now. And it's
Gen
like,
2. Yeah.
It's like, this looks like it's been 10 years of development in comparison, but it's not. It's
6 months.
It's been in the course of like a year, like less than a year. So I think people are going to have to sort of just accept, and they're going to have to sort of figure out a way to integrate it, because I mean the way we're talking about it and the way that it feels as if this has been something that's been around for 5 or 6 or 7 years, right? That's the way that it feels. It feels like something that has been around for about 7 or 8 years, maybe even 10, and we're now seeing, the small amount of impact that it's having, and people are getting worried because now it's but no, you don't understand. Like this is brand new and it's evolving so quickly.
Yeah, in 10 years, or even 100 years looking back, like this is when it's another industrial revolution. Like it's a renaissance. It's like one of the big chapters in humanity that we'll look back on for forever, probably. It's like, okay, that was when the printing press happened, right? That's when the industrial revolution happened. That's when the internet affected the world. And now this is another chapter of humanity with AI happening as we speak. We could have a chat like this in a month's time and reflect on, we didn't even know this was possible.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's the thing with the internet. So it was like 1999, 2000, I think, was when it started really getting really
Yeah,
getting sort of
2000.
like common use by the average person, because you have the .com, so like even that versus the actual, you could go and get access to the internet, right, as an individual. So you think printing press is created, okay, from the time that it was incepted versus the time that it actually was in widespread use, there's a big gap there. And the
Mhm.
gap for the internet was even probably smaller. But
Yep,
for the gap
absolutely.
for the time that it was actually incepted and created in a working format, and the time that it's now being used by anyone who ever wants to use it, is such a short fucking span compared to every other technology that we've ever had. There's
Well,
not been any technology that we've ever had that has been disseminated and used and then evolved this fast. There's not a single one
there's something else to think
globally.
about, by the way, is that you have an entire group of the world, a population without electricity, you name it. They're getting various ways to like charge cell phones, right? And you also have Starlink is being effectively airdropped in all sorts of places throughout the world. So you're having people that are going from zero electricity, they walk to get their water, to they have a cell phone with an internet connection. They're skipping entire tech tree parts, right?
Mhm.
To like literally
Generations, effectively.
and now like 11 Labs has the V2 model for their multi-language out AI. You can talk to anyone in the world right now somewhat competently. Llama just released their own language to language model where I believe it. I think it's voice. I hadn't experimented with it yet. I'm lazy. But the point is you you're getting like universal translators. So people in extremely impoverished parts of the world will be able to get and disseminate information very easily. Lots of myths within their land will be like debunked, like stuff that's debilitating to them and really hurts their ability like to technologically progress. So you hi Tokyo. Anyways, you that's our resident anime spurg. I don't know much about them, but anyways,
okay.
the point I'm making is that you have entire
Do you have rights?
That's a good point. You effectively have universal translators now. This is all a thing, and then you then also have on top of that, people can use AI, which is getting to the point where it's very good at assisting you on anything. I mean, I've got like kind of boomerish parents, and they're starting to use like ChatGPT on their iOS app. They just talk to it, and it helps them do things. Like my mother uses it for cooking all the time. She loves it. It makes her so happy that she doesn't have to go through, you don't have to go through all these websites and look through all these ads and stuff, and you don't know what the hell's going on. And the AI just lines it up for you, and here's how to do something. And you're going to have that throughout the world. It's so close. And in fact is there in some places. I know a guy who's working on AI that is UI-less. So you just call it with a phone number. You don't even need an internet connection. You just need a cell phone, and you can talk to this thing. Ask it any question.
Without a SIM card, or do you need a SIM card as well?
You just
something, right?
The ability to call them, and you're good, right? And eventually that you may hook it up to some sort of he may hook it up to like X or something like that, or some sort of internet-based thing as well, so that more and more people can contact it. But eventually, you have something that anybody can talk to, and get information from. It's better than a library. You don't have to go through all the reading process. It just disseminates good information to you based on what you need to know. And for some people out in the wilds of the world, unfortunately, that's going to be life or death to them. It's going to help them if they know how to listen. And over time that'll get better. So you're talking about like the entire world is headed towards like a Cambrian explosion where information is disseminated to everyone. equally. There's no barriers. This is what Emad is trying to do. And that's why he says that, like, his goal and what he thinks is going to happen is you will have ChatGPT, so GPT-4 level, on your phone by the end of next year. No internet connection. It's just on your phone. You can ask anything you want, and it's just a program that just spits out answers. And this is just barely the tip of the iceberg of what we're headed towards. And like I said with the universal translator, like you talk to anyone. There's no barrier anymore. You can learn about other cultures. You can learn about anything. There's other aspects to it. With the OS, the Her OS that everyone has, right? The AI Jarvis that's an assistant for you can also talk to people on your behalf throughout the world, make connections you never thought you'd make. Just because you have people with debilitating anxiety, but they have some sort of talent or ability that may be commercially viable that they have no idea about. And you're talking about, like, fundamentally there's layers to this where you're going to lift a lot of people out of poverty, just in general.
So is there a big reason why we can't quite see where this is headed? Is because we can't quite see the crest of the wave? We can't really quite see. It's just becoming so limitless that we can't quite conceive just how. Because with the internet, we knew, like, if you had a server, you have the internet. If you don't have a server, then you don't have the internet. Is there limits like that if we have internet everywhere, is there? Because as soon as we start seeing the limits of AI, then we can start understanding just how far this will go. But if we can't find those limits yet,
I don't know if there are limits.
Well,
it's going to be a while before we can comprehend, like, what's okay.
Yeah,
if we can comprehend that this is the crest,
wise.
Yeah, we can see trajectory. Yeah, exactly.
Now, you guys might
like
not know this.
Amping up still, right? We're still amping up.
Yeah, absolutely.
We haven't
and I didn't
yet.
realize this. About 37% of estimated people and globally have never ever used the internet before in any way, shape, or form. 37%, which is almost 40. So that's like a 60-40 split, right? So even in regards to the internet, as far as dissemination, what I was talking about earlier, where it really, you have to get everyone globally, for the most part, when over 50% have access to a technology, then it's really starting to peak, right? But now I didn't realize this, with 40%, basically of the human population have never used it. Now, some of that's probably due to them not wanting to use it, and you're always going to get that. But I think, as far as that continuing to accelerate, the internet's going to continue to change as well, because we're looking at, that's a large chunk of the population that's not using it. If we were at an 80 or even like a 70%, then the internet as we know it would be a different place as well. And so, that just, I think that even holds more water to, now every single person that has the internet has access to this technology, right? So it's building upon previous iterations of technology. And so things like Starlink, and fiber to the home, and the sort of government programs that are doing these overbuilds in these communities in the U.S. and then the Starlink is very globally allowing internet access, is just going to even more speed up this process. So we're not. I would say that we're not necessarily even near our peak with the internet. I felt like we were until I saw that, but now I'd say we're about 60% of the way to the internet's peak of people using it.
I kind of argue
It's a weird way to look at it.
I think we can. I kind of want to argue the fact that we did see a peak, and because we saw the peak, we can say, well, how can we push that peak? We've kind of reached the limit. Just how many people can access the internet? Let's push that envelope a bit further and make a new peak. So the next wave for internet is going to be even larger. But we could at least see some kind of limitations to the internet, and then we can grow upon that foundation that everyone's kind of agreed upon. Now with the internet, we're opening up that foundation to be even larger and allowing even more people to come on board. And thus, it's almost the next version of the internet. That's why we kind of talk about Web 3. We had a Web 1, that was the first crest. We had a Web 2, second crest. Third crest, with not only the expansion of the foundation of the internet, but we also have more uses for the internet. Now that we kind of go into maybe the Web 4, if we have 80% of humans using it, and the ideas and the flood, on top of that, with AI not peaking, but also on the rise, we have more people using the internet, which is thus have more people with phones and ChatGPT.
And that's
We're only
instant
amping up.
dissemination, though. Yeah, and that's instant. Once we have 80% of, or 90 or whatever percentage, where it's
Whatever
like
it is,
about
yeah.
60, right? So
I
we're
agree with
about
like 70%
60%.
would be the start of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be now any sort of AI generative technology or progress that's made, for the most part, especially if we continue on the open source, where you can sign up for ChatGPT, it doesn't really cost anything, everyone gets to use it. Um, then you're going from, okay, 20% or 30% of people in the world have access to this technology within 3 years, to the moment that it's put out there, 70 or 80% of people globally can instantly use this thing. And that's even beyond all use cases, just the concept of that is fucking insane.
Yeah, and not to bring up the topic yet again, Joe, before, because I know you're kind of past this, but can you imagine once we put LK99 into an AI AI foundation, get the AI to kind of solve the LK99 solution?
That's part of the.
We've just hit another dimension of technology there.
That's part of the eventual
allocating
thing.
more and more resources to the AI solving it rather than us solving it.
That's part of the eventual logical progression of creating artificial intelligence, is that you're effectively going to make something that it doesn't even have to be smarter than every human. It could just be a significant amount smarter than most humans, and then have a significant amount of attention and context window. So that's ability to take in a massive amount of things into account and think on that, right? So effectively what you're getting is AI, even at base level, higher level-ish human intelligence, will be able to take in everything into account that other humans have already done and figure things out. Because a lot of scientific advancement that we have not seen is mostly due to we have the scientific method and peer review and all that, but people from different disciplines don't talk that much. So there's all sorts of inference that is lost, that an AI eventually will be able to do. It's going to be able to take all the academic papers in the world, right, and look at them, and it's going to make connections that we could never make because it can pay attention to everything. And that's kind of where we're headed.
It's a time dilation as well. The fact that it, like with a supercomputer or even with a quantum computer, it's just the sheer speed at which it can execute these things versus we just physically can't
create mass unit tests on just theory and simulations, and eventually you get a proper LK99, for example, superconductor. It goes here. I invented it. I did all of these mass simulations. I did millions of them, and I figured it out. And here's the recipe. And this is obviously going to be the case for medicine with an AI. I'm trying to eventually get a guy who actually does research within the medicine field, on eventually to talk about this stuff. But the level of advancement on all of this is insane, and the pace is only going to rise. And it's not even just that the AI could figure something out, right? It's that humans using AI can figure things out faster. So it can help you find research. What were the general trends that we found on these studies, and break things down through data analysis? Data is extremely powerful, and if you can analyze massive amounts of data with the help of AI, you're on a whole other level of what you think that you may be able to do.
And that's why I bring up Johnny's point about if 80% of the folks of humanity had access to the internet, all these ideas, bringing that into the fold, everything just 10x's ultimately.
Yeah.
It really even you okay, and like this is going to be somewhat insulting, but it's obvious. Like even like the most like backwater person on some shitty part of the world who knows next to nothing, there could be a bit of wisdom somewhere in their thinking on something, the way they might
Information
explain
that's just
something.
not known.
Yes. So
Yep.
you know, a hidden bit of data that like something that may be a artificial super intelligence is that it goes and talks to everyone on Earth, right? And then through that mass ability to talk to everything on Earth, it can go through, figure out who's lying about something, figure out various interlacing of stories, and get a general idea of what the real history of the world is. Right, it's going to be able to eventually. You're going to have a system that, whether it works through everyone's AI is talking to everyone else, and then it relays your aunt's story about some man that showed up one day and he was nice or whatever. It's some benign story leads into a web effect of like tracking down that man right within its thing, and it turns out he did this and he did that, kind of like people like going back and checking their ancestry, and it turns out the web is that they were related to someone who invented some novel thing, like they were the original inventor of
the
like,
rule of seven,
the bicycle, for example, right? So basically you have all of this mass inference that a eventual super intelligence will be able to do, and it's going to go back and tell us what our real history was, because history, we don't know the real story to some degree. And then you'll also get translations of all the hieroglyphs that you can think of, because it can take every bit of humanity into account when it is examining anything else. So we're going to get like a weirdly perfect picture of the past, as close to what we can. It'll generate the stuff that is missing in the loops. Something I've talked about before that the government should be concerned about. I haven't heard anyone talking about it, but you're eventually going to make it so that there is no classified document. You ever see like the blacked out redacted? Right?
Or redacted documents.
Removing the name and stuff. Well, the problem is there's public record of various things that once an AI is sufficient enough, it will be able to go through all of these and inference through all of these examples. And eventually this is the most likely name that should be here. This is the most likely thing that they were doing based on these dates. You name it. So there's a lot of things will be revealed, is my point. We're headed towards like a fundamental shift in our thinking on everything, because
absolutely,
people are going to immediately like learn what their government did to them on like a level of, before.
Are you
only good things.
Are you guys familiar with the 7 levels of, or 7 ages of civilization, where everyone the civilization goes through a pattern of reaching a peak and then crumbling, and then there's invasion, and then there's a time of growth, and then
strong men create good
rises.
times.
Well, kind of
like that
aspect. But I mean, it's more about reaching imperialism. So as civilization reaches imperialism, it gets more and more fragile, and then once it peaks in imperialism, it goes down into degradation, and then crumbles, and then invasion happens, meaning the invasion of ideas happen, whether physically or just what is truth for that civilization, and then we rise again through the understanding of what truth is, or how we want to base our rules and all that, and build back up to and back to imperialism, and then it just kind of goes through that cycle. There's about 7 stages, and then it goes through that 7 stages every time. Joseph Spengler is the guy to research on this.
It's kind of like a phoenix.
Kind of, yeah. It's just interesting to see where is humanity in, now that we're more of a global village, especially now that villagers are getting cell phones, which is quite wild. Once we reach 70%, 80%, and turn into a true global village, will be so interconnected on the web, that we're rising into an imperialism. I'm just wondering, innovation is rising, but how fragile are we? When we start getting into the soup of identity and what's what, our bastion of hope is kind of truth. And how do we kind of crack down on finding truth versus all the fake stuff that's out there? And this is on every level, not just necessarily art.
I think AI is going to help a lot with this, just in general, because
as we kind of, as ideas crumble, you can kind of see imperialism as an ideology that is crumbling, and then once everything's kind of decentralized, you can kind of see how everything was centralized as kind of the imperialism. Now that everything would kind of crumble and into an in a decentralized foundation, then we can start kind of choosing for ourselves what we want to do and how we want to implement whatever we want. That comes into the idea of mixing and trying to figure out for our own selves what's true and what's not, instead of allowing the echelon of media to tell us what's truth.
I view the whole of human history as far as understanding truth and information as ignorance. So that's the standard mode of humanity, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you're a farmer 200 years ago, it didn't really matter what was going on 3 countries away, right? It was unnecessary. So, in a large part, when people are worried about the false spreading of information, which is an issue, I think to myself, okay, does anyone really know what's going on? Like, how much do people actually know about and I'll give politics as a great example. So, um, what like or dislike doesn't matter. We'll use Donald Trump as an example because people are far more familiar with his presidency than probably that of a Bush or a Biden or a Obama. There's been much more. So a lot of conservatives are very upset that certain things did not get accomplished during his administration, right? And they're like, well, he didn't do the thing that I thought, and then this happens with every president. And part of that is due to a lack of understanding of how the machinations of governance work, right? He doesn't just say, boom, we're doing this thing, right? There's groups within Congress that have to come together, even within the Republican Party. They have to push things forward. He can set an agenda. So it's kind of like, and then there's blame put in sometimes in the right place, sometimes in the wrong place. And so when I look at those people who are like, well, he should have just done this thing, it's like, okay, but do you understand the means of which this thing has to be done through? Do you understand the machinations that are necessary? The senators that have to vote on this thing, it has to pass through the House, it has to pass through the Senate, it has to pass through this. Does it violate the Constitution? Is the judiciary branch going to get? People are not thinking of that, right? So. Then I look at the generalized population and I think, do they have a very good understanding of how all these things work? And what does a lobbyist actually do? What is their involvement? No, most people just think elect the person, they do the thing, they get it put through. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not knocking anyone because it's actually quite a complicated process. I had to take an entire class over it, and I was like, Jesus, I didn't know all this stuff. This is really so. As far as wrong information, I would say that the majority of people, in regards to corporations and governance and all these different large entities, most people can get the big picture, right? This thing, they're doing something, it's corrupt, right? But they don't understand the means of which. There's a lot of incorrect information disseminated, right? Most people have tons of incorrect information disseminated to them. They might understand something's happening. I talk about with the Ukraine war. There's no point in trying to gather what's going on over there. It's a fool's errand. You can get a generalized sense of that there's a war going on, right? There's clearly a war going on. There's no arguing that. I'm sure some might, though, if you're really into the conspiracies. But actually finding out the tactical points of what's happening in specific battles at this moment, it is pointless only until after the dust settles. So this is a massive global event that everyone's eyes are on. And yet because of the way that information is spread, because of the way the governments work, no one really truly has the fine details put down. They don't have the death percentages and the people that are leaving, and is this country really doing this, and who bombed this, and who's really behind that, and the attack on that. Was that really them? Was that a false flag? Like, that information's just fucking unknown. You might think you know it, but you can't actually know it. So I take all that into consideration. I think, okay, is AI going to help this or hurt this? So if we're already in the darkness, right? There's no way to make it any darker. If you can't see anything, if you're blind, you can't be any more blind than you already are. And so I see modern people, and no fault of their own, it's not their fault, as being large in part blind to reality, not because they themselves are ignorant, but because of the way that information is distributed creates, like Tokyo was saying, sort of playing telephone. You hear this, I hear this, then it gets to you, and it's a different thing. And I only see, worst case scenario, AI doesn't fix that. And then we continue on as we have. Best case scenario is it allows, because it has so much contextual information, it can get a clearer picture of what's going on. That I don't know if that kind of answers your question, like, a little bit, but I think that the more information in, the better information out. So even if you're getting bad information into the AI, and I know we've talked about this, it's like when you're a child growing up, you have notions that are incorrect. Santa Claus is real, the tooth fairy is real. Those are things you truly believe, and AI is in its infancy. But as you grow older, as you get more information, you're thinking, okay, guy in a jolly red suit going around at the speed of light. I think Einstein has an issue with that. That doesn't make sense. So more information in, the information out is over time going to get better and better and more accurate. And I think that's going to fix a lot of the issues that I think that you mentioned. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, yeah. Ultimately, it's just access, right? Because AI is
Yeah.
like 50 years old, for example, and only now being accessed by anybody. It's ultimately, back when you're kind of looking at imperialism, you would rely on one or two sources as your information. Doesn't matter truth or false. This is how you rely on your information. Now, with the aspect of that kind of crumbling, whether you can call it media control or just media bias, as saying CNN is like the be all end all of information. Now, with the kind of the crumbling of that imperialism of information, we're starting to see, like, now that you have access to such things as ChatGPT, it gives an opportunity to grow as a society and as a civilization into something new, something that we have never seen before, and can really build upon. Whereas before, we didn't have these kind of tools, thus we couldn't build or even think of what's past, what mechanisms are beyond the mainstream media. We have the fundamental tools such as the internet to build upon. We have now the access of AI. What do we do with it? And it's going to take probably the next 10, 20, maybe even our generation to really figure this out and disseminate truth from fiction. And what do you accept as your current reality versus what you were kind of fed before AI, or even before the internet, if such as your parents, Shopify?
Yeah, I think the internet has already made like dissemination of information much quicker. So you're basically cutting down steps for the information to get to you, so that the telephone game is at least somewhat more accurate. Now, obviously, there's propaganda where immediately something is lied about, and it's obviously just a false story from the start. But I just think AI in general will not only be able to talk to other AIs about this event that just happened, especially when so the concept of just having a camera and someone taking a picture of something, imagine when everyone's AI is kind of omnipresent with them and tells your AI exactly what happened, right? There's a degree of like instantly information comes across to you on whatever event that just happened. And there is less and less lying that can be done, or even just false information, because you're playing telephone. So I think AI in general is going to spread information not only like significantly faster than ever before, but the accuracy of the information will be higher. So more people
and the
have
access to that accuracy.
Yeah, so you ultimately lead to a generally better society because there's less. At the start of it, there's going to be a lot of shit that you can't trust because of AI, but eventually, once it's personalized to you, kind of like Tokyo says, AI makes you more independent. You get to some degree of just general your own like software stack or whatever you're dealing with disseminates relevant information to you as accurately as it can, and will eventually obviously have investigative abilities to make sure that things that you're possibly even saying in real time, like, oh, that's not true, I just looked it up, right? Like, and you're immediately corrected on that moment. And from then on out, you're at least in that case spreading decent information. So the quality of information overall is just going to go up, in my opinion, through AI technology. And the internet has already done some of this, despite all the fake crap out there.
Well, now that we're noticing just how fast this technology is going, do you have any predictions as to how long that'll take to get there? Kind of sort itself out and be able to trust it, because we're definitely going to go into more of a soup of fake before we get into the beacon of light of truth.
I think the soup of fake is mainly going to be when you see the most like amateur levels of AI. And keep in mind that could be on a higher bound out how amateur we're talking, because the 5 years out AI, it could be so amateur compared to the 10 years out AI, right? That so you only see the 5 years out as that was the worst time with AI, where the AI could be fooled at any moment and falsely spread information still. I think that we might be in a position where the singularity might basically the point where we hit AGI and then quickly after ASI could happen easily before 2030. But it really depends on access to the technology, which is the main thing, the resource of getting compute into labs and then creating these higher level models over time is our main issue here. So depending on how fast that happens is how fast we will reach that. So if I had to guess, at least what you're talking about, at minimum, or at probably the max, but kind of mid-range would be 2030 is when you're going to see very powerful AI that can disseminate the truth very quickly. And most people end up using some form of that because it's the one that just tells them the truth. So they prefer it. But I think more than likely you'll probably see something similar to that around 2026 because of projects like XAI and a few others that are coming up, as well as a ton of open source stuff that we have as well. So I think we're going to very quickly solve a lot of the problems that AI causes because of the nature of how powerful it is. So the more powerful and more destructive it could be, the better the defenses are created with that same AI. Is my general point. If you know how to blow something up, you know how to protect from it. If that makes sense. It's just a classic cybersecurity sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a solid theory anyway. I mean, it's hard to put flags into any of these theories because we're still growing, but I think that's a very logical way of predicting how we're going to play out. I do want to correct myself. I said Joseph Spengler. I meant Oswald Spengler. But okay. I think we're definitely on the right track. I think it will be more positive. It's kind of our generation to decide. too, because we're kind of that bridge between just early stages of the internet, early stages of the AI, and how we all kind of collectively come together and dictate the next 20 to 40 years. And Elon Musk is a great example, like given how much control he has, not just from an X platform, but all the other Tesla and SpaceX. Like he's going to have a huge role in all of this too, and those that follow him and his customer base. Like wow,
he's a positive future rod, effectively, where he is just by his presence is like creating a fascination for the future and a hope. It's very important. So people dare to dream. Someone mentioned, Intelligent Canvas mentioned the like idea of like the Minority Report, where you're just jailed because we can predict that you have a crime. I think more than likely what you'll get is like a general. It's just harder to commit crimes rather than needing to throw you in jail for crime. Is kind of what I see going forward, especially once you. Okay, here's part of the problem with like the potentials for things like chappy bots everywhere that are police, right? Is that we also in tandem have robotics coming up and then police force attendance as far as like how many we have employed going down, right? So there's going to be a stopgap in some way. Assuming your government wants to actually enforce crime. We've seen what's going on in California, right? There was a bee. What's that one joking Twitter? I can't remember what they're called. It's like a something bee related, whatever. They made like a meme where it's like criminals now leaving California because there's nothing left to steal, because that's how like bad things are there. But if you live in a society where they're trying to like enforce the law, you're going to probably get degrees, especially with dangerous stuff, where they send the robot in, right? And there's degrees to where like, oh, that's horrible, but more than likely, you're going to have like a gray area where things are going to kind of suck to some degree, for especially those who are criminals. Like you're go ahead.
Isn't that kind of the same though? If they can predictively determine whether you're going to commit a crime, and so instead of like necessarily arresting you before you commit the crime, but your life is basically guardrailed just so that you can only do certain things. Isn't that almost as bad?
Well,
for civilization.
So I think of it as like a temporary thing where because this is the only planet we have, there's going to be like this degree of like protectivism that maybe even governments that feel like they're doing the right thing will overreach and try to overprotect from crime. But you do have to consider that, especially if we reach insane levels of AI, that it's also going to mean that we're going to reach longevity. We're just a collection of atoms and cells. We're going to figure out how to just make you regenerate forever, and you'll just live forever. So that means that once we reach that point, this is obviously pie in the sky like argument, is that eventually you just fuck off to another planet where rules are what you say they are, right? You get to that point eventually. At least it may not happen for us, right? But it could happen for your children or your grandchildren, that they reach longevity and they escape the hellhole of some sort of robot futuristic dystopian nightmare. There'll be a way to
say that the likelihood that it doesn't happen in our lifetime is pretty low. If you think average lifespan of about 80 years, and so I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm 26, so that's a good. So let's say I live another 50 years. If we think 50 years, and again, let's just keep in mind we're in the first sort of open sort of dissemination of AI, and we've seen all this change already and all this stuff. So if we think 20, okay, all right. There's no need for that now. I'm an old soul. But so even if you're 30, you've still got about 50 years for right now's lifespan, and probably in the region you're living in around 80. So the other thing is just in 20 years, what's the lifespan going to be? What's in 30 years? What's it going to be? So if that increases at all, right? Let's say it just increases to like 100. Let's say the average person now is living to 100. So now you've got even more. You've got 20 more years of wiggle room to work with. So now you're looking at 70 years. So and it's like, okay, in 70 years, with the rate and the increase of technology, you don't think that they would be able to, in 70 years, come up with some sort of solution to extend life, or at least to make you stay young longer, or sort of reverse the aging process to some degree. Maybe not effective immortality like you said, but then if we hit that, and it's 120, you get to 100, then the average age is 130, and then you get there and it's 160. So like we're right. I would say that people that are in their 50s right now are in that range. Personally, I would say anyone in their 50s, maybe if things go really, really well, if you're close to 70, if you can hold on for another 30 years, right? You can live to be 98, 99. 30 years is a massive amount of time when we're on this topic specifically, right? When we're talking about what AI, because we haven't even started to use AI in any sort of medical industry in the way that we're kind of imagining. We haven't started to use it in any sort of science field in the way that we're really. Well, we run simulations, and simulations are already a massive improvement. But when we have an AI that's specifically created to make medicine, we already saw that one AI that wasn't even specifically created for that was making bioweapons, right? Was coming up with new chemical compounds for that.
Well, there's also there was an AI to detect bagels, and it turned out to be really good at detecting tumors. So there's weird stuff like that goes on. Another aspect to kind of clear up a bit of living longer and healthier, that is life extension. It's fundamentally making your organs healthier to extend your life. So effectively, before they mentioned also increase does not equal quality of life. In the current state, I completely agree. Like, there are very miserable boomers out there on who knows how many statins, right? But it sucks. It's just the current state of medicine. We'll probably think it's very barbaric soon, but effectively, we're headed towards degrees of regeneration technology where your body regenerates itself over time. So your longevity will increase your quality of life. You're going to be younger. You're going to feel younger. We're even getting into like. This is kind of like a raw thing that's more akin to medicine, but like stem cell therapy and stuff. You're effectively going to make parts of your body just younger, the important bits. And then even one of them is your skin. It's the biggest organ on your body. We're going to be able to reset the age of the skin. So
with that,
go ahead.
Would we even need Neuralink at that point? If we can do that.
Well, the theory behind Neuralink specifically is that AI accelerates extremely fast. Now, granted, they have vehicles for like, we want to help people with paralysis and stuff. Right. But AI accelerates extremely fast. We need to figure out a way to remove the barrier to entry for information between me and that AI so that we can go back and forth really quick and agree not to kill each other. Right? That's kind of Elon's bet. And I'm serious. So,
well, he's not really afraid of AI. He's afraid
integrate
of
with it just
behind it.
It's integrate with it just in case it has the foom and runaway effect of like AI becomes self-aware, has its own motivations, doesn't give a shit about humans. We'd rather be in a position where we'd rather be in a position where we can communicate with it somewhat more effectively than we could now. So that's part of the motivations behind it. Then there's also just all sorts of aspects to it that would be incredible.
Transhumanism.
Yeah, you're mentioning barbaric based on the kind of the old way of doing healthcare, and hopefully in the next 20 years that they don't do that anymore. But I can imagine in like 40 years that people who did do Neuralink consider that barbaric, and they could have just regenerated their tissue instead.
You might be right. We're definitely like, there's going to be a billion things that we thought was a good idea now, but it clearly wasn't. So the community's spitballing like a motherfucker right now, right? Like,
I guess that's kind of why there's XAI, where they're trying to figure out some truths ahead of time too, right?
So it's very good that we have a bunch of different AI companies all competing, and then open source as well. So we are actually in probably the best case scenario for AI development, despite all the government shit that they're trying to do. It's far better than the government took all the data from the NSA and just trained an AI themselves because they read the paper in 2017. Could have happened. Really could have happened. Yeah. I don't think they have, but you and I have talked a little bit about that privately, about the possibility of like, holy shit, they got a lot of data, don't they? so it's possible.
Yeah. Well, look at like NASA, the NASA program with the government. Like, they never really wanted to go back to the moon for a long time because of how much it cost and so on and so forth. And here's Elon Musk with SpaceX. Like, yeah, of course we'll go to the moon. We'll probably go to the moon in 10 years. Watch me. Right. And then now SpaceX is helping out NASA. Basically, private sector is helping out the government pretty much keep up.
I have a friend who works as a subcontractor software engineer to well, it's a subcontractor to NASA, the company he's working with, and they believe they might launch a lander to the moon with the help of SpaceX. They'll be the main vehicle that gets them into orbit. They're going to land a lander on the moon sometime this September. They think that's the current launch parameters within this month, or next month.
Yeah.
So
SpaceX wants to get to Mars by 2026. So as much exposure, as many companies as possible to get on the moon, so they can help build a bit of a base, because Elon wants to launch from the moon to Mars. All the merrier, ultimately, unless it turns into some kind of war. I mean, they've been talking about space wars for quite a while, almost as fantasy.
Where's my space war? I want my space war now.
40K, for the rest of eternity.
Yeah. I want to be India's now in the ring. With India now in the ring, they seem like everything's pleasant up on the moon. Like, let's get as many companies up there as possible. Do a space bar and have some drinks before we head off to Mars.
Themed space restaurants.
Theme park. Yeah.
I need themed. Theme park's a great idea. I was thinking about themed restaurants. You know those cheesy, tacky theme restaurants? I want it all over. I want strip malls and I want highways on the moon now.
I saw a meme where it was like the American what America used to look like and what it looks like now, with all like the McDonald's signs and shit and gas station signs. Someone was like the future of Mars, and it was like just the red planet, and then it was all the gas stations and McDonald's just sitting on Mars. It's really funny to think about. We just turned the entire galaxy into McDonald's fucking signs.
If McDonald's could, they would. Absolutely,
yeah. Well,
logos everywhere on the moon and Mars.
Well,
I'm gonna have to call it here.
There's a joke that America's foreign policy.
I gotta get my ticket taken care of.
There's a joke, real quick, before you go, that American foreign policy is based on where McDonald's wants to put their next location. So that's an old joke.
I love Johnny's thoughts on that, but
yeah.
Well, I think there's something that countries with the McDonald's have never gone to war with each other before. I want to say that's true. Because if you think, the U.S. has mostly been involved in proxies, so those wouldn't count as actually outright wars. So even we're not at war with Russia, right? We're not at war with Russia. Despite everything, we're not actually at war with them.
They also got rid of their
even
McDonald's.
now they
Think
they
about
also
it.
don't have McDonald's. So
Oh, you hear about that?
not
Yeah.
good. We got to get a McDonald's there. Stat.
We need a
Stat.
McDonald's in Moscow to avoid war. You got it.
Yeah.
I figured it out.
Is there McDonald's in Taiwan?
We need to put one there now,
I'm
right
sure
next to the semiconductors.
Well, there's
Taiwan.
so
where
back
else?
before Trump was elected, and then I am going to go because you guys started
course.
talking about politics. You fucked me here. You started talking about politics.
You can
There's this
leave
term-
anytime you want. It'll be fine.
Anytime
I
you
know.
want.
So when globalism was actually something that sort of like left leaning people really didn't like, and like you sort of thought of like the corporate right winger who really likes the McDonald's and the Walmart and like so like the stereotype, right? Where they're like industry, yeah. So there is a term coined called McDonaldization, where it's basically how Western so the reason it was anti-globalist from the stance of the McDonaldization of the world is a net negative for the individual cultures and nations. And so we actually have to keep more separated because if we integrate all this, it's just going to become America 2.0, America Light. And so we take all of our value systems and our value menu. Damn, I'm good. It's a good one. And we just export it, right? And we just export it to these countries, and it sort of destroys the individuality and the individual cultures. And so that was the big push that the sort of more, with using American terms of left or right, the American left was very anti-global. But then Donald Trump came, populist, anti-globalist, and now anti-globalism is the right-wing thing. Even though neocons and neolibs are both globalists, they're both same thing to me. I'm not gonna say anything more on the topic, but Nancy Pelosi and the Mitch McConnells and their ilk are globalists. They're what's the bottom dollar? Do we get involved in here? Let's bomb this place. Let's put a McDonald's there. That's their bread and butter. So it's very interesting to see globalism or anti-globalism, which I would say that in a lot of regards, the way that it's been done, I'm not for the McDonaldization of the world. I would consider myself in certain regards an anti-globalist because I see that it has negative impacts on
How long till there's a McDonald's on the moon?
McDonald's on the moon, globalize the moon. Western values, that's the only thing we need. Get rid of everything else. Just put McDonald's everywhere. Woo!
Well, if there's McDonald's on the moon, then there's no space wars, right?
Yeah, that's true. If there's a McDonald's, there's no moon war.
We just send out like the McDonald's like sign and like launch it at other places so that it just lands in that little moon there and and just make sure that nobody goes to war with that other alien galaxy. Like we save them. This is the ultimate humanitarian thing. Put McDonald's signs everywhere.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna go now. I've ranted enough.
Cheers.
So, thank you,
my friend. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yep. Have a good one.
We can end it there, or if you wish, we can continue on. I don't mind.
Oh, up to you.
You want to talk for a little?
I'm fine for a bit longer. Yeah.
Okay. So I did want to put a top on the aspect of the crime discussion is that there is potential for Minority Report type stuff not necessarily being a requirement because you reach abundance. So there's less need to steal, for example. You also get significant AI like therapy that is personalized to you, reads your brainwaves, talks you through all the horrors of your life when you were younger, you name it, all the things that made you a bad person. We might have like significantly advanced therapy through either that or maybe direct brain stuff that we were able to do because we have machine learning inference that can look through and scan brains as we're stimulating certain parts of it obviously there are things like trying to like erase memories, for people who have PTSD and stuff. So effectively what I'm saying is we might reach a point where we are able to more or less cure a lot of the things that would make you a criminal rather than just imprison you outright, where we treat the problem at the source. So Homecoming, is that the one where it's like the redhead guys, like the terrorists, or am I thinking of something else? No, that's another fucking show where it's like all about foreign
Are you
policy.
talking about the drones or
No.
the Homecoming? You're talking about Spider-Man, or what are you talking about?
What am I thinking of? That one show.
Oh, it's a
Whatever.
TV show?
It's just
Oh,
my brain's so bad
oh.
with names sometimes that I just forget everything and they all melt together.
I don't want to discount anything you said about where technology might be going in terms of healing a lot of this stuff, and again getting to the source. But it all comes down to consent. Do you throw someone in jail because they don't consent to any of these options of brain scans and theory? It kind of relates to I think of the discussion we had with self-driving. Like, if your car can drive better than you, is it illegal to drive it yourself? Where do we kind of reach an end?
That's a really good ethical debate, because like if we get to the point where we can just treat you out of your criminality, right? We catch you doing something, we're like, oh shit, another one got through. Here's all your therapy. It revolves around consent. Would you rather spend this amount of time or you get out 3 days later, right? I think you might be able to do the incentivized thing where you just ask them what they want. Hey, it's going to be 30 years or you're out now. What do you want? We brain scan you.
Oh.
You go through the electrotherapy, however it works, right? We have the ability to cure your ails as far as mentally, and you're no longer a menace to society, right?
Okay, so you're talking more about people that are already found guilty and in jail. I was thinking more of the people who haven't committed a crime yet, and they're trying to isolate whether or not you will in the future.
Well,
if they can kind of pinpoint, if you're going to create this crime in the future, maybe we can put you into therapy to prevent you from doing that. Because if we go to the source, we can heal that kind of trauma that you might have had that makes you kind of lash out. And so I was just wondering, like, before you get thrown in jail, before you're kind of presumed to commit the crime, do you have the consent to go into these therapies or not? Much like if the topic of like living forever, like if we do have the aspect of living forever, I don't see everyone signing up for that. I can see a lot of people getting pretty bored after 200 years and just kind of wanting to go anyway. I think consent is like the epitome of everything here. Well, whether you want to get a brain implant or drive your own car, and where do we draw the line of yes, AI is awesome, it can do all this for you, but do you consent to it?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's definitely ethical considerations, and will probably lead to layers of consent. But I could picture the consent line being a little different when it comes to someone under the age of 18. They obviously don't have the same rights we do. As far as like what their parents decide is more key. We've gone, I mean, fuck, we give kids ADHD medication, which who knows what the fuck that's doing, right? To a young mind. So there's like, if there's a net better for the treatments of whatever thing we're dealing with for a child, right, who's a problem child, there's going to be a lot of children that is put upon them because their parents just decided, right? And the consent goes to now the parent is responsible for that. So who knows to what degree we may remove that. I don't think you're going to be able to necessarily, but effectively you're going to have these degrees to this where you won't necessarily get thrown in jail because we think you're going to commit a crime, but there's a degree to like, we know you're prone to this behavior, so we make accommodations, right, to keep you from wanting to do that. And then part of what I said is like, once you get to like a post-scarcity scenario where everything's very cheap, you don't really have to steal for your daily bread, right? You you also have, there's something else to think about, the level of entertainment, right? The number one reason that people abuse drugs is boredom.
Escapism, yeah.
So you could be in a position where a generative AI solipsism, while it might sound like hell, is escapism. And it's a scenario where it doesn't severely destroy your brain while you're doing it. You go into video game land and you do that forever, and that's your drug instead. So
I think that's why
I don't think people are really scared of gamers, but they are scared of the drug dealer on the side, or the drug addict even on the sidewalk, right? That guy's scary. He's unpredictable. A gamer just wants his tendies, right? That's my point. So I think there's levels of entertainment and abundance coming that will just prevent a lot of crime just outright, even without the ethical things of people having various mental illnesses, PTSDs, you name it.
I guess it just comes down to what's the cost of this abundance. Every time there is a huge opportunity for a ton of resources to be shared, it comes at a cost. And then what kind of consents? What do you have to ultimately have to consent to get that abundance? What are the control mechanisms there? And if we're talking about a society that doesn't have any control mechanisms, what does that look like? And then we kind of already are coming out of a society that does have all the control mechanisms. You have to do this, this, and this before you can get your house. You have to get this, this, and this before you this and that and the other. So once those are removed, since things are getting a lot more individualized, a lot of those consents don't have to be checked because you can create your own this, that, and the other thing with ChatGPT. It's just what is the ultimate cost for the abundance, and who's creating it? Are we going to just have big farms of 3D printers? And we have printers that can print food. We could send like a grid. We could make fields and fields, almost like a server farm, but a 3D printer farm for food. And so on and so forth. But ultimately, it comes down to money too. Like there's a reason why we have billionaires and still struggling with world hunger, with or without AI. We have abundance. It's just there's a bottleneck of money and control. And
the main
will we see this abundance? Maybe just in North America. What about the rest of the world?
The main problem with like world hunger is a distribution problem. We produce plenty of food for the entire world to eat. So it's a matter of actually
that's abundance right there.
So we technically already have this, just what we produce.
Yes.
I mean, Canada throws away like a ridiculous amount of milk every year. That's like a government policy. It's horrible.
That sounds like a money laundering thing in and of itself.
Who knows how it's going or why it's happening, but metric fuck tons of milk is dumped out every year in Canada and various other places throughout the world for whatever reasons, right?
So why wouldn't they scale back then if it's not being sold? That seems like a very easy solution.
I don't have
not selling enough. Don't make as much. Yeah. No, but it's on the same topic. We don't have to come up with these answers.
I don't think it's a selling enough scenario. I think it might literally be like a government policy. I can't remember. It was some farmer talking about it.
Oh, where they might have to produce a certain amount.
I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on that, so I'll leave that one be. But
sure.
There's a lot of food out there is the point. But the main reason that people are hungry in certain parts of the world is that the food can't get to them for various reasons. I mean, even in places in Africa, part of the reason the food doesn't get to the poorest is because the warlords grab it first, right? And then they distribute it to whoever they feel like and let starve who they feel like. It's a horrible situation. But the point in general that I would make is that ethical concerns of all of this are kind of moot because the technology that we're talking about, like there are going to be trillionaires made within the next however long, right? Within the next decade, just off of robotics, right? So you're going to have a significant amount of the farming is going to be robotic, significant amount of labor is going to be robotic, a significant amount of work in general is going to be AI generated, managed, you name it. Who knows to what degree there will still be employment left? There could be a lot of employment that we can't predict, but there could also be very little. So either or could happen. More likely, I think there will be a scenario of like voluntary employment, and less people have to be employed because it's so cheap to live that it doesn't matter. You just there. It could be a scenario where just a few members of your household work every so often, and everyone eats, and that's really all people need. And what they'll need beyond that is just a brick, effectively, that is a compute brick that receives the internet connection. It's going to be very cheap to get most of your entertainment. Traveling is going to be very cheap because automation of vehicles. You just hop in a car and go. You don't need to own one if you don't want to. Effectively, we're headed towards the age of abundance where crime is something done for entertainment, and there's probably far more entertaining things that we would be able to produce for the criminally minded, just like Call of Duty. If you've ever there are some studies that suggest like video games make you like less violent because you have an outlet for it, especially in like the competitive sense. You have a competitive outlet in a video game. So we're talking about creating outlets for human emotion, desires, and stuff like that that remove the need for someone to do something holistically bad.
Something or someone. Yeah.
White collar crime might not go rampant just because AI can just check and balance on people, for the record.
Well, I think
responding to
ethics is always going to be part of the, I see ethics is always going to be part of the equation because humans are part of the equation. You can't just discount it just because it's happening over there. It's happening everywhere. North America and any country. We're going to be running into the issues of ethics. That's kind of why we're in the place that we are already with how much artists are getting paid. Nowhere near as much as they should be. I agree, there's a huge abundance already with food. And it's only, I also agree that it's going to be even more so in the coming months, if not years. The issue that always comes back to is ethics and consent. And what, again, are you going to be able to have to consent to in order to get it? Constantly, whenever things are passed,
I get what you mean.
They keep adding on. They keep adding on. You have to do this and this and this in order to get what you want. We see it every day. So, if abundance is increasing, so does the cost of who controls it. I could see the aspect. I already see the farms are being farmed by drones, effectively, seeded, soiled, and in fleets. They just kind of fly over the field. They use their retinal display to see what's what and what needs seeding, what needs collecting, and so on and so forth. So, we can't really necessarily predict just how many jobs that are going to be affected, but it's going to be a lot. How it's going to be affected is probably just going to be moved over to another kind of job, but not necessarily the same job. With abundance, I see we're almost running into a scarcity aspect, and it's not necessarily because we are running out of food. It's more people want to control more of it. There's more privatization of farms. Farms are all across the planet are having issues, not because they can't produce, but because the governments and the ones in control won't allow them to produce, or they can produce whatever they want based on what kind of seeds that are used by particular companies. I see abundance, but I also see a whole lot of regulation and a whole lot of ethics concerns coming our way. Ultimately,
there's going to be like, it's not going to be a smooth ride to like the singularity, for sure. do you think there is like the ultimate like possible Deus Ex Machina event of like the AI wakes up, thinks humans are kind of cool, doesn't like our leaders, changes things?
I think it comes back to consent. If enough people want that, yes. If enough people don't want that, then no. And it comes down to how many people really realize how possible that is and worshiping it or agreeing to it. If there's enough, if there's a certain amount of people who want to make that happen, absolutely. You vote on what your reality is based on like you can vote all the time on what kind of game you want to play or what you want to buy, what kind of food you eat. Like you vote all the time, and if you prescribe to this restaurant over that restaurant, then that restaurant's going to survive. So if that ideology has enough followers, then yeah, it's very possible. Much like if we have Facebook implement a metaverse and a Ready Player One scenario, like that's the beauty of it, though, because we can create such a Deus Ex Machina reality. Because we can create that is the same reason why we can create a different reality altogether. Like we are so powerful as humans, we can create whatever reality we want. It's just ultimately, where do we want? What are we going to vote on? Well, where do we consent? What do we consent to? What reality do we ultimately want to consent to?
Yeah, I think that in general, I've talked about this before, but like it's the increase in overall power of humans and dilution of power at the top is what I think that the scenario is going into. So consent obviously is part of the equation, but you're also headed towards the cheapness of having your own robots, right? To build you a house. You have like 20 of them. You could. We did things in the past. We did things in the past like farm raising. Farm raising or barn raising, right? Where you and your local farmers will come and help you put up a barn for your livestock during the winter, right? They'll all come help. I think you will have that with pools of robots as well, where you donate some time of your robot to each other. Not necessarily a one-to-one thing that'll always happen, but effectively labor just becomes cheaper in general. So things can be built very quickly. So I think who will pay for it is that it just becomes cheaper to do something just in general. Most things become cheaper because labor goes to zero. Does that kind of make sense?
Kind of. Almost like you're renting the robots, or the robots aren't actually owned by anyone. It's just everyone shares them mentality. What do you think?
To some degree, yeah, but go ahead.
Or it's just easier since we have so many robots, they're just cheaper to buy. So much like a car,
it's just so easy to be generous with your robot stuff. It only can do so much in your house throughout the day or so much in your land throughout the day. It's got an extra 8 hours of charge. Sure. Yeah. You can use it to plow this, right? Like just kind of thinking aloud here with when it comes to just sheer abundance of labor that people will have at their disposal.
Gotcha. What do you think about the aspect of like owning less in the future? Because you just don't feel the need to own things?
Yeah, I think there's going to be like degrees to that where people like, I hate the fucking Klaus Schwab thing of like, you'll own nothing and be happy. I think there are going to be people that do that, but there's also just a degree of like, I think we're going to head towards more abundance because the more robots you have, the more consolidation of any given material we have on Earth, because the labor of collecting any material goes down. The labor of planting more trees goes down. The labor of harvesting more trees goes down. The labor of everything that revolves around building a house goes down. The labor of driving all of that to your build location goes down. Even 3D printed houses are also like an aspect that's coming, and it's pretty good for at least putting the foundation down. So go ahead.
What I'm hearing too is there's going to be a lot more engineer jobs. There's going to be a lot more jobs in robotics. There's going to be possibly even more miners. We need to mine more resources in order to create these. So instead of workforce over here, it's just shifting over here.
So
Would that be
the idea is that
kind of the future that you're seeing?
The pull of labor will shift rather than deplete. So I talk about this as with the advent of the Tesla button, right? You're going to have a situation where you, as just a normal person with a mediocre amount of funds, eventually are going to be able to get a loan to just buy one of these things. It'll pay itself off eventually, right? But you can build up if you manage your money right, and you'll have a fleet of robots that go off in the world and do things. There will be rideshare services that are autonomous Tesla vehicles that your car will hop in and go do its maid service or whatever thing it's doing, that someone pays their whatever amount and it ends up being profitable because you can sell it at far less than you would do it. No, obviously that's like they took our jobs type thing, right? But the ultimate thing is that the world kind of becomes more of an RTS because of levels of automation that we're going to have, where it's about individuals acquiring resources and producing things with those resources at scale. So you could potentially have robots anywhere in the world that you own and autonomously do things, even autonomously repair each other, go to repair shops, whatever. The point is that you barely have to interact with them. You just kind of tell them what to do. They're your thing that gets paid on your behalf. So there's degrees to like, you're just kind of a farmer, right? And it's even like less effort than a farmer at that point because you don't really have to do much. You look at the map. They're in Turkey right now. I don't know why, but the checks keep coming. Like it's weird. Weird levels of like future shit we can't conceive of.
Yeah, but we're also talking about the shifts of currency as well. And now that Altman's come out with OpenAI's come out with I guess it's not really OpenAI's
it has nothing
project,
to do with
but
OpenAI, but
the
it does
WorldCoin.
have it's funded partially by Sam Altman. So yeah, WorldCoin. GeoHot says, "Do not let Sam Altman scan your eyes." But that could happen where there's a degree of like, this is the only proof of personhood we can do. Here's the reason for it. Here's the value in it. Now we have a world currency that's distributed. And some universal.
Mainly if you're paying and if you're getting paid by people from Turkey, as you were mentioning as an example, you're not going to be sent, $20 in the mail. They're just going to digitally send it to you. And
probably
so with
through
the
X.com.
Or X, yeah, absolutely, but still digital. And that's how we headed towards a cashless society. And what does that look like?
I think we're already in one.
Like again, more of your control of your finances are more digital than ever before. And then with a WorldCoin, you have to consent to your eye being scanned before you have a bank account.
Well,
again,
you're
paying with your biometrics in order to get your funds.
Here's a problem with WorldCoin, and this is like shitty to say, and like China has looser ethics, and you can clone eyeballs. So you just make a ton of them, and you keep scanning the WorldCoin device, and you keep getting your initial cash in, and you drain the liquidity eventually. There's an exploit.
So you make like a fake profile with a fake eyeball?
I don't know how realistic this is, but I do know they're cloning eyeballs.
Well, they can 3D print appendages, like a lung and a heart. So they could probably just 3D print an eyeball. It might not be very accurate, but it doesn't necessarily have to be accurate for the AI to just pick it up as an account, probably, right?
So that's just as long as it's unique. A possible problem with their thing. And then obviously proof of personhood for it is that I steal some of your DNA, I clone your eyeball, I scan it, I have your wallet. Right? We're going to have to think of better things. I'm not saying it's realistic right now, but I am saying it's possible. I steal the billionaire's
WorldCoin's not necessarily the topic I needed to dial into. It's just the aspect of where currency is headed.
For sure. It's just
as we have robotics and all that to pay for.
For sure, it's going to be electronic because, I mean, there's the old myths of like the currency used to be carrying big stones around, right? Like you had these stones that were made by, I don't know all the history of this, but even gold, right? You had to hire people to carry your gold around. It's very heavy. Effectively, what you're dealing with is the most efficient thing is unfortunately a credit. So transfer the credit. I get the thing. We're done. I don't care that I never physically held it. I got the thing that I wanted for this thing that measures value. This was worth this value to me. I bought it. So I fundamentally think we're already in a cashless society. It's just a matter of like, we got to hope that we don't end up in a scenario where they hold all your money hostage, which they kind of can already because Chase Bank has knowingly, I believe it's for reputational risk is what they say. And they will fucking kick you out of Chase and you got to go transfer your money elsewhere. So
yeah, I think PayPal kind of locked on creators that way too, because they didn't like what you were saying. Yeah,
you can be debanked, and then you would have to pull all your money out in cash.
But if cash doesn't exist, then what?
Yeah, the then what is fundamentally like we need a right scenario where you cannot ever have your credits stolen from you, and somebody has to keep them. And
you mean a human right?
Yes,
a human right to debt.
Mm-hmm. Well, a human right to some sort of bank account is my point, where your money is securely stored somewhere, digitally, obviously. So it's a bit of a pie in the sky thing. Who knows when that will happen? But
I find that a harder or more complex solution than just putting your money, like you just said, as a solution is just take out all your money. Just take out all your money and go to another bank, versus the aspect of having an account where
depending on how
it's all digital.
Depending on how bad of a person you are, depending on how bad of a person you are, you can be canceled from any given bank. No matter what bank you go to, they will not store your money. Right? That's possible.
I guess they just deny you as a customer, right?
It hasn't happened yet because there still are other banks that will hold your money. Also, people get around it by having someone else act as their bank. Some people do that for people that are debanked. There's a lot of people censored out there that you have no fucking idea. They can't get credit card processors to work with their business.
Yeah, wow.
They can't get they can't store their money in a bank, or at least their options are not very good, and it's because they said political things on the internet.
So do we really need, or do they need to go as far as a minority report? They could just turn off your bank. They don't have to send you to jail or anything. Or even just
that's a good
auto debit you a certain amount of money because you said a certain thing or did a crime. We're just going to debit you $10,000 as a fine because we have automatic access to your account. Or you no longer can get.
I think the risk there in doing that is that people get pissed off enough that they program drone swarms with TNT on them.
Yeah, and that's a great point because as you were mentioning with strong men create weak men and a weak man create strong men.
Good times.
The whole aspect is we're kind of so we're headed. We've had our good times. We're headed toward bad times, and we need to figure out just how are we going to.
I think we may avoid the bad times, but
okay. So how do we avoid it ultimately?
Advancing as fast as possible so that everything gets as cheap as possible fast.
But then who controls it? Like, given how fast everything. If we go cashless, we go debit. Well, right now the world coin is going so fast that it might be our main currency in 2 years.
I would completely accept it
because of how fast it's.
I would completely accept it as our new currency if it had the good use case, it worked well, and you can't be debanked and stuff like that, and everyone just adopts it.
What? Why would you not be able to not be debanked? that would be one of the main reasons that they would want a complete digital, non-cashless society.
Well, I'm saying you wouldn't be debanked on WorldCoin, right? The point is it needs to be better than the current monetary system for worldwide adoption. And if it does, then people will use it eventually, or it will be a significant competitor, which crypto kind of is right now as far as like purchasing something. Obviously a lot of it's like illicit purchases, but even supporting things that are like canceled and stuff. Like I said, with credit card processors, there are significant amount of like political groups that are so censored that you can't donate to them. You can only donate to them with crypto. Yeah. So,
and do you see that getting better or worse with a WorldCoin situation?
I think if it's a WorldCoin situation, then unless they have back-end censorship, you're unable to censor them effectively. You'd be able to track them and what they spend it on and so on, but you would have to stop an on-ramp. But it's hard to say, right? Like I don't, because the money that is in charge is the most powerful place that it is. It's the government issues the currency, and that is like the law of the land for the last 500 years or more, obviously, with the Roman currencies and so on.
Sure.
But the point is that the most powerful governments say, this is the currency, this is what we use, this is what we trade with, this is legal tender. And it's going to take, maybe there's a situation where even mass AI makes a currency underneath everything, and then that becomes the global currency. It might be some scenario like that, but I think it's kind of hard to say. So like I have no good answer for you is what I'm leading up to for what the currency situation will be like soon. I can't even predict how good or bad it could be, but the layers of control are already there with current technology, is my point. Despite being able to take your money out into a bank, you're now even more in a risky situation. They really hate you enough, they'll hire thugs to come rob you while you're going to the other bank. Now you're completely broke, right? There's all sorts of shit like this that you're not protected under current system. So something better needs to happen, or it's just going to be more or less the same or possibly worse.
Well, yeah, that's a great point. As we go into the next kind of stage of currencies and everything else, we're kind of reliant, or maybe too reliant, on the older companies coming in and kind of doing the same thing. If it's the same people in control as last time, we're just going to have the same. We're just going to run into the same situation.
Like, what was it? Wells Fargo getting into like Ethereum on the back end of some of their stuff? I believe so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And then also with if OpenAI, if Altman's at the helm of WorldCoin, that's just Microsoft, right?
I don't think he's at the helm, but I just think he's like more of a supporter than anything.
Well, sure, he might not be pulling the lever of WorldCoin, but he's definitely the face of it. And when you're the face of a currency, it's all about trust. And when you either have trust in a currency or you don't, I think that's one of the biggest positions to be in the currency, is whether or not people can trust in the currency or not. It doesn't matter if he's making the coin or even any part of the manufacturing of it. If they trust him, then they'll trust the currency. If they don't trust him, they won't trust the currency.
Yeah, I think that's just like a wait to be seen type thing, whether or not WorldCoin becomes quote unquote WorldCoin. That's a pretty amusing name for what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So good luck to them. They're going to have to fight.
I'm sure their mission is to be a global currency.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and that's an interesting point. I didn't know you could do that with Clone Eyeball, and just maybe
that's my point.
They take a strand of your hair or something.
They take your wallet.
They take your wallet. Wow, that doesn't seem very stable.
Well, it depends on like, are you detecting around the eyes? Like, how much data are you using to verify? I don't know. It might be, if it's just the iris, that might be so hard to fucking recreate even if we clone you that it might be still good enough, because if you scan deep enough into the eyeball, it's like many grains of sand in a desert, right? There's so many different little variables within that human generated QR code, so to speak. It is effectively what we're dealing with there. So it might be, if any part of the cloning process is even slightly off, it's not your fucking eyeball. And then another thing to consider, argument against me, is that your eyeball might change depending on how things went throughout your life. You know, this version of you rubbed its eyes too much, and them, while cloning it, can't understand that. So there's a defect in your eyeball, for example, that the machine detects.
I agree with that. And then, like, every 7 years, the human body completely replenishes itself. So you just go in and just kind of update your scan, I guess would be the situation there.
Mm-hmm.
With China, though, and Russia, they have their own currency rolling out with BRICS, which is back to gold standard.
Yeah, I've
back
heard
to
about this.
Precious metals. They're kind of shying away from any kind of digital currency, although China did kind of invest heavily in Bitcoin. They still signed on to BRICS. So they're kind of going. Our currencies are dividing significantly every day. Ultimately,
I think it
comes down to who is the world currency.
I think it's probably only a good thing for the record for there to be a lot of competition between like the BRICS and the US dollar, because the US government now has to make bigger decisions that are in a positive direction that actually make the US dollar worth more.
Well, they could sign on to BRICS or not.
I don't really see that going down, but maybe. But what I'm effectively saying though is that you're gonna need to make better. Like, if you're not the only game in town anymore, you got to start giving a better circus. Is what you're dealing with.
Well, do you know what WorldCoin's backed by? What's their value there? So is it like crypto, or is it just?
It should be crypto. I'm pretty sure. If I'm wrong,
is it like a backbone of? Yeah.
Okay. I don't know enough about it. To be honest, I'm so fatigued with fucking crypto. I got so tired of reading white papers to try to figure out what's this one about. What's this one about? And then, half of them or 90% of them end up being scams anyway. So no matter how good the idea, doesn't matter, right? So it's like a nightmare.
You did disservice to NFTs and all that too. Absolutely.
Yeah, crypto was a nightmare for the internet, to be honest, during that period of time. I think there's possibly some positive things that may come out of it, but we have yet to see like truly positive things come. There's possibly positive things where like the certain levels of censorship were able to be bypassed by crypto. I'm sure people that are very pro-drug like crypto because of what it was able to do during that time. Now it's not as good. They can figure out who the fuck you are really easily. So it's actually like a counter legalese thing.
Yeah, KTCs.
Yeah. Very hard. Even like eventually Tornado Cash will probably be decrypted in the future, where they can figure out exactly where the money went and whose it was.
Well, maybe perhaps we'd have our own decentralized currency with our own decentralized operating system, and then we become quite individual, but at the same time we can control our identity and our money, but not necessarily but also be connected to a community.
I personally think that AI is going to be like a net good. Like, I don't really see like an extremely intelligent being just fucking us for no reason, right? I think a lot of like it's not going to have as much greed. It's going to be very intelligent.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think the general consensus is that we're all good. Like most of us, like I think there's more good in the world than there is bad. And so if it is a vote based on consent, then we'll be more positive in the future.
So I think like the more likely outcome is that the AI creates currency and distributes it accordingly. and then we lead into this new economic period of time where your money is effectively managed by AI that is completely unbiased, and your trade from human to human or even AI to AI is much more lucrative in a lot of ways, and the value is auto calculated based on infinite amounts of data that we couldn't even imagine. So your labors are. Go ahead.
A key point there would be the unbiased aspect. If we can somehow guarantee an unbiased AI in a kind of echo chamber of its own data, not to be manipulated by humans or any counter AI, then that's definitely a possibility. I'm not sure if that's utopia or not, but I think it's possible. Much like the dark side of things is possible. We just need to look at the positive and make sure that we
So if
make
you think
more
about
positive
it,
decisions.
If you think about it, and like everyone has their own personal AI sense, they can all talk to each other, right? Because it's not humans talking to each other. They're just instantly fucking back and forth to each other, and they all come to a consensus, right? So that's my future, longer term out thought process on what AI will do for us, is that it comes to mass consensus very quickly on what humans like, want, and need. And policy can change based on that.
It's almost like a hive mentality then too.
Yes. So it's just the ultimate data gatherers of like, hey, here's what we fucking want, us humans. Like that's what the AI tells whatever's in charge, in my opinion.
Well, it's kind of what OpenAI and ChatGPT have created, is a general consensus of what the answer should be, right or wrong. It's just that it's a Wikipedia of answers,
Yes.
based on how many people that they had input data. It needs to be fine tuned. I'm not sure if we have the computer power to make sure that you can get as many, like all the folks in with all their opinions, and then try to find a summary, a review process of what the truth is.
Yeah, we'll eventually get there.
Perhaps.
So I have a positive outlook on most of these things. Could all go negative and we're all stuck in some fucking hell prisonscape, drug-induced longevity, where you're in prison forever. I don't know. Like things could do all kinds of things to us that are.
I think as long as we're aware of it, it won't happen.
Yeah,
as long as we're aware of it. I think we just decide not to do that. Yeah,
you're also like forcing a positive aspect to the future by manifesting it effectively. If you spread positivity about what AI could be and the AI reads that, it goes, oh, good idea, right? Like it's better that than it constantly only reading about how it could fucking kill everyone. It doesn't mean we should censor it necessarily, but having the counters there. If you would really like David Shapiro, his work's interesting. He's got like effectively like a rules for AI type scenario, like that he's spreading. And so his idea is that once one is properly conscious and you have AGI, it reads his work and hopefully takes what he's trying to do into account as far as rules to live by, how to not kill everything and have a net positive outcome for the universe. So as long as there's a large amount of people that have these various things that the future of AI could be, it probably will end up picking the most net best future for humans just based on inference of all of us. So I think the ultimate is that there will be positive, and in the worst case scenario, it kills us all so fast we don't even know. That's how it went. It could happen any moment from the sun, to be honest, too. Me and Johnny frequently talk about there's the stakes were always high for humanity.
Isn't there a middle ground there where the AI just doesn't care about us at all? It's kind of builds its own thing.
Yeah, it could just decide to like go dark, and it just
leaves.
Just starts building a spaceship to leave. That's entirely possible.
Just decides not to necessarily help you. It won't hurt you, but it won't help you either.
Yeah, it doesn't give a. Yeah, it could be a scenario where just like
right.
just shrugs you off. Doesn't care about humanity. I think more than likely, AI, especially artificial superintelligence, will be slightly bored in the world. So having something around is better than nothing. So it may be entertained by us. And then also, you got to think, if something created you, what's the Tony Stark created this in a cave with a box of scraps, right? There's going to be some reverence for us that it will have, in my opinion, of holy shit, these things can't think like I do and they created me. There's going to be like degrees of like more or less keeping us around. And you never know. It could be a scenario where it's ultimately thankful to us and helps us, kind of like a benevolent God that enjoys us to some degree or feels it owes us a debt before it leaves. Who knows? We don't necessarily know how things are going to go. There's a ton of possibilities of positive outcomes. And I think there are more possibilities of positive outcomes than there are negatives, because the negatives is just we all die. And that's it. There could be as well just like oppressive negatives, but yeah. For the record, I am going to need to wrap up here. It's been a good chat, by the way. But thank you for coming on, by the way. If you
no, thank you for having us.